Hey everybody, happy Monday. Today is Monday, March 8th. Welcome to another episode of TechStrong TV. We have an amazing lineup of conversations on today's episode. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my sister Donna. She's celebrating her birthday today, so happy birthday, Donna. Our first conversation today is a very, very interesting one. Alan talks with Gaurav Shekhar, who is a professor at the University of Texas in Dallas, and he talks about the importance of low-code, no-code technology. His college is actually training students to use low-code and no-code technology. They're doing it in partnership with Appian, which is a low-code leader. They've been doing low-code before it was cool, man. But it's a great conversation that Alan and Gaurav have, and totally worth checking out. After that conversation, Alan speaks with Casey O'Mara, who's a fine Irishman. He is a VP of Worldwide Business Development and Global Alliances at JFrog. And he talks about JFrog now being available on AWS GovCloud and Azure Government Cloud. So obviously, JFrog is expanding its horizons into the government cloud space. And their inclusion now with AWS GovCloud and Azure Government Cloud allows customers who want that stability and security to now use JFrog's Artifactory and X-Ray on those clouds. So great thing for JFrog and for government customers. After that, we dive into the first of a series of conversations that we have with members of the newly established Value Stream Management Consortium. It just so happens that March is the topic spotlight on DevOps.com is Value Stream Management. And so we have a ton of information about Value Stream Management on our site. And so this is a very, very timely conversation. Alan speaks with Jeffrey Keyes, who is VP of Product at Plutora, and he is a member of the Value Stream Consortium. So he talks with Alan about why it launched and why Plutora is so involved in this consortium, and why Jeffrey thinks this is an important step in Value Stream Management in general. And like I said, we're going to be speaking with members of different members of the consortium throughout the next few weeks. Tomorrow we'll be featuring a conversation with Helen Beal, who is the chair of the Value Stream Consortium. That's going to be a great conversation as well. But Jeff is always a great interview. So hope you can join us for that one for sure. All right, after that, we have our Something Old segment. This one comes from the recent Predict 2021 virtual summit, and it features Stephen McGill, who is the CEO of a company called MuseDev, and he talks about the evolution of technology from lab to mainstream. Artificial intelligence meets software development. What he discusses is the fact that every now and then academic research projects break through into the mainstream and really has an impact on the way we work. So there are a number of examples of that happening, but he focuses on what innovations are now making their way from computer science labs into practice. Specifically, we take a look at innovations in new programming languages, IDEs, and security tooling, and in particular, talking about how AI applied to software development will offer up some exciting new capabilities and opportunities for software developers in 2020 and beyond. So it's a really, really fascinating look at technology and the way it has progressed and improved our lives in a number of different ways. After that, we have part one of a two-part Haunted Hacker podcast, as always, with Mike Jones. He always has great conversations with folks in the cybersecurity space. This time, he speaks with David Lee, aka DC Cybersec. They talk about InfoSec, cybersecurity, and all the really cool stuff that's happening in the space. So, like I said before, Mike always gives a great podcast and has great conversations, so definitely one worth checking out. After that, we have the news headlines featuring me, and then I will have a conversation, which I'm very, very, very proud to be bringing to you. This is a conversation with three women in the cybersecurity world. This is as part of the International Women's Month. Actually, International Women's Day is today, March 8th. And so as part of that, I speak with Digital Guardian CTO Deborah Danielson, the VP of Sales Engineering at Threat Connect, Lara Meadows, and VP of Customer Success at Devo, Jill Orhan. We have a conversation about their insights and experiences as women in cybersecurity, which is a field that basically has been dominated mostly by men. And they also offer up what they see the industry needs to do to encourage more diversity and inclusion. We have a great conversation, and I certainly learned a lot. And they were very honest and open in their opinions. So give this conversation a listen. I guarantee you won't regret that one. After that, I have a conversation with Tim Jarrett, who is with Veracode. He is the Senior Director of Product Management. And we talk about the evolving role of developers in their job description and how they are more and more adding security into their role. So as companies begin to shift more of their responsibility for security to development teams, they need to solve the challenges of how to provide their developers with effective security training that developers actually want to participate in. And this is super important, especially as organizations are moving more toward a DevSecOps mindset and methodology. And so Tim and I talk about whether developers really need to incorporate more security into their job training and into their education in general. It's a great conversation. And Tim's always got a lot of great things to say. After that, I tell you about some of the webinars that are coming up. And then after that, I've got Mitch Ashley and his Analyst Corner segment. As always, Mitch is great for commentary, and as always, this is a fascinating topic that he takes a look at. So I hope you'll join us for that one. Finally, after Mitch's Analyst Corner segment, we have The View with Vizard, and Mike Vizard talks with RAFE CEO Hasib Budani. They talk about how managing fleets of Kubernetes clusters will get easier. We'll see about that. I think that's going to be another great conversation. And as I said before, we've got it all today, folks, and with a huge emphasis on value stream management. It's a great conversation, a great topic. The entire show today is just chock full of value add for everybody. So I hope you can stick around and watch today's show, and we're going to get things kicked off right after this commercial message. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's kick off today's TechStrong TV broadcast with a conversation between Alan and Gaurav Shekhar, who is a professor at the University of Texas in Dallas, and they talk about low-code, no-code technology, how his school is actually teaching their students in the low-code, no-code technology under a partnership with Appian, which is a low-code leader, and great conversation. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another episode for TechStrong TV. My guest for this episode is Gaurav Shekhar. Gaurav, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Good afternoon, Alan. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. So, Gaurav, we should start off maybe a little bit about yourself and, what you're involved in, and we'll jump from there.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everybody. I am a program director of the Graduate Business Analytics program at the University of Texas at Dallas, where I'm also an assistant professor of instruction in the Naveen Jindal School of Management.
Excellent. So, and of course, we're here to talk today about a recent announcement involving Appian, one of the leaders in what we call the low code, no code field, and the University of Texas. It does. Why don't you tell them? You probably know more about it than I do.
Absolutely. And before we even talk about the recent development, I would like to take us a little back in the history of how it really started. So we've been working with Appian for about 2 years on a variety of things. It was a chance encounter that we met some of their executives at a networking event, and that's how the conversation started. But it was in 2019 that the Appian user group was hosted at UT Dallas. And that's where for the first time I saw the demand of Appian in the market, because we had almost 60 different organizations sitting in the meeting space. And just looking at that huge opportunity where they were looking for skill sets, and we being a premier institution who provides great tech talent, we found a disconnect there that day, that maybe we needed more students who could go out in the workspace equipped with skills related to no code, low code, Appian, and similar things. So that kind of led into a discussion that brought out some of the leaders in Appian together, and a forum that discussed about bringing this as a formal course at UT Dallas. And we're very proud that this spring, this January, we finally launched a new course called Robotic Process Automation, where the tool of choice is Appian. And we train students how to really look at business problems and use the power of low code and no code to develop solutions. Of course, at the speed of light, at the speed of bright, as UTD says.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize it was around RPA on top of everything else, right? So I've got to tell you, RPA is one of the most popular subjects for articles here on DevOps.com and some of our other sites, because it's really starting to take off. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is because maybe it's not obvious on its face, the connection between low code, no code, and RPA, right? So why not, if you don't mind, why don't you help our audience? What's the connection there?
Absolutely. And that's a great question to ask. In fact, that is something I believe, whether it is an individual or an organization, they should ponder on the connection. They should find that relationship, because the minute they're able to realize the connection, they would see a lot of difference to the way they work. We have to be cognizant of the fact that the consumer needs and the speed at which technology changes is very fast. You might have a customer that you brought into your business, and within 2 or 3 years, their need or the motivation to stay with your organization changes, which requires the organization itself to internally manifest solutions which keep up with that changing landscape when it comes to consumer needs. First of all, the biggest benefit of low code and no code is the time it takes to turn around a solution. When we look at development or coding, let's say in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, it always was, and it still is looked at as a very specialized skill set. It's like you really have to spend a great amount of time before you start belting out applications of quality applications. But over a period of time, there has been this rising need for everybody to kind of take a problem statement, use a technical skill, maybe a tool, and quickly convert it into a solution that can be used, and they move forward with that. And I think that is one of the things that gave that shot in the arm to the need for low code and no code. Now, when we talk about RPA, robotic process automation, we have to remember that when we decide that a certain business process, at the end of the day, it's a business process, and all we are doing is we're using technology to automate it. When we reach a stage of maturity where the process needs to be run in the same way or henceforth, that's where RPA really comes into picture. Now, there is something called intelligent RPA, where the process Even though it's a robotic process, it learns over a period of time and kinds of adjusts to itself. But this connection between low code, that I am able to translate my business problem statement into a digital form and then automating it is I think an interesting piece for everybody to ponder on, because the minute you understand what that life cycle of your process, of your business process, from its inception to its automation is, you will see that a lot of different things around the organization, where it requires digitization or developing a tool to solve a problem, that becomes so streamlined and so simple that, again, the ones who are reaping the benefit are the organizations, and directly or indirectly, it translates to the whole customer experience out there. Again, tomorrow, if I have a group of people, and I would say it's a sizable group, that would like to see a different feature in my product, I would like to go through a process that turns around that solution in the least amount of time possible. So I think that's where the power of low code and no code is, that, simply pointing and clicking. Now, I'm not saying that it takes away the role of the coder or the developer completely, but it just makes more people get onto the platform where they can create these technical solutions.
Absolutely. And look, I think the past year, with all we've been through, with COVID, forcing people to work from home, forcing organizations to move, on digital transformation, speed or time to market, time to deployment is at a premium. And not only is that at a premium, but developer resources are at a premium, right? We just don't have enough developers who are going to sit and code out these things. So when you can speed that time to deployment and not tax the quote unquote developers at the organization, right, the team building these apps relatively quickly and outside of the full-blown development process, that's a win-win-win all around for everyone, right? And so it makes a heck of a lot of sense. But there's two myths, Gaurav, that I want to address head on with you. Number one is that this is fine for down and dirty, simple apps. And maybe that was true at some point years ago, but the level of sophistication of the apps that you can develop now using these tools, sky's the limit. You know what I mean? They're not these are not just simple little widgets or whatever. They're truly full blown, pretty complex, sophisticated applications.
Absolutely. And you're very right about the complexity of this. Again, I like the way you use the word myth. When we talk about technology, if it is simply about connecting blocks together, people feel it's something very easy to do, and it may not be useful for their very complicated business scenarios. And that's not the truth, because any complicated application or landscape of applications was once a simple tool. And they just built on with more layers adding to it over a period of time. I feel that low code, no code, and also the advent of AI-based technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, all these different things factor into the way apps are developed, they are digitized, and they are provisioned for their end users. For example, now, if you think about just creating, let's say, a web page which has a table on it, or maybe a spreadsheet, now you can just write on a piece of paper, sketch a table, take a picture of it, and immediately translate it into a spreadsheet. We have the technology available. What we have to remember is business is always the reason. The business need is always the reason why technological advancements happen. And right now, the business need is speed. The business need is this growing demand. Think about what has pandemic done to us. The pandemic has pushed our envelope in terms of how much of digitization we need in our lives. Right now, an average practitioner spends about 6 to 7 hours on video meetings. Or even if you're not working, the consumption of digital data, the consumption of digital platforms has gone up. to really cater to those changing needs. As I talked about earlier, it's the user's needs, the landscape of their needs is changing. So you need to have tools that fit their need. And to make that happen, you're right. There is a dearth of qualified professionals. There's a dearth of sophisticated developers who can just create anything from any kind of requirements given to them. So what do we need to do? We need to add people who still understand the business logic, who still understand the basics of technology, but they're able to spin out these applications in no time. And again, these applications don't really have to be very advanced applications. But at the same time, because we have something like low code and no code, which is augmenting the speed at which we deliver, and coupling it with things like AI, machine learning, we're able to bring in that complexity. Now, let me leave you here with a thought on this question. Complex doesn't always mean very good, and simple doesn't mean bad.
This is also true. You're 100% correct. I think that's the period at the end of that sentence. Let's go on to that second myth now, though. And that is, because we're not using, quote unquote, developers to develop these, we're getting them done fast, that somehow we're cutting corners, maybe when it comes to security or compliance or governance or following other corporate policies in where we're hosting it or something like that. And again, not true. Maybe it was at one time, but certainly not true in today's low code, no code environments. Your view on that?
Absolutely. My apologies. Please.
Gaurav, I'm sorry, we're losing your audio there a sec. Can you repeat?
Yes, is this better?
Good. Better, yes.
Okay. So what I was saying was, no, absolutely. That's a great point that you brought up, Alan. And I think that maybe for a small period of time, people may have had that perception. The key word is perception here.
Yeah.
I believe an organization, whether it employs seasoned developers or it employs people who may have just learned how to code on a low code or a no code platform, the strength of an application in terms of its security, whether it is compliant with the different frameworks and standards, it's also a process. And those people are not going away. We always have people who work as part of the quality assurance team. Now, whether they see an application which is developed by a developer, seasoned developer, or a beginner in development, it doesn't change their policies of how they evaluate those applications. I believe that any organization who has strong processes around validating and vetting their applications will still continue to do that, and they will not see any change there. Again, it doesn't really change who is developing that product. Your processes after the product is developed remains the same. And I believe that a lot of these platforms, for example, these are some of the features that I was able to discuss with my students last week in my class, was how some of these platforms like Appian, they give you the ability to actually test your application and make sure that it is complying with standards related to maybe the user experience, user design, security, whether it is making sure that the components are not open to any kind of flaw that can be exploited at a later point of time. So I feel that as we are going forward with the low-code application platforms, there are more features that are getting inbuilt to help provision quality application. So I feel it's a big myth that just because somebody who just learned coding a few weeks ago has developed an app, that app would have holes in it. That's absolutely not true. And again, think about it this way. A platform that we are using is sophisticated enough. If it's all the market leaders like Appian and all, their platform itself is so robust that it helps the developer, the person who's working on it, with tips and tricks. Maybe if they are developing something incorrectly, there are recommendations to fix it. There are warnings that are thrown. So I feel that the quality of applications that are coming out of these low-code platforms is over a period of time going up. And I feel as more and more users start using these applications, of course, there is an inherent sense of trust that will develop. And as I mentioned, it's a perception that takes some time, but in the next 10 years, this is going to be the next big thing. More and more people are joining this workforce who we call developers. Development is not going to be something that is just limited to a small group of people. In fact, let me take this opportunity to mention this. 2-3 decades ago, when spreadsheets or presentation software like PowerPoint came in, we used to have specialized people in the organization who would create those.
Who would do that?
PowerPoints.
Desktop publishing.
Yeah.
Remember that word?
Desktop publishing. Absolutely. Oh, it's been some time I heard that, but thank you for bringing that.
I'm old, but yeah.
But now you don't even mention it on a job description, but you are expected to know spreadsheets, a word processor, a presentation software. The same way we are going to see low code in the future, where whether you are a fresher in the organization or you are a senior executive, that would be a default skill set in your on your profile. So I believe that this has a lot of scope in the future for more and more people adopting it. And one of the things which I feel that low code is really breaking, it's shattering the glass ceiling is the fact that people used to think about development as a very complicated and a difficult exercise. And they didn't believe that at the end of the day, it's more like translating from one language to another, the language of business processes and business problems to technical solutions. And the more we have these low-code platforms, I think people will get confident about getting their hands dirty with it and creating solutions. So I feel there's a big future for low-code platforms.
You know what? Your enthusiasm is contagious. Gaurav, we're out of time and we need to wrap up. For people who may be interested in these classes and what you guys are doing over at University of Texas, Dallas, what's the URL for the website?
Well, they can go to jindal.utdallas.edu. And there they can find our programs. This is the business analytics program. And if they want to contact me directly, they can do that over the email as well.
Thank you. Professor Gaurav Shekhar here at on TechStrong TV with us. Thanks for joining us, Gaurav. Come back and join us again.
Thank you so much for having me here.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up on TechStrong TV, we have a conversation between Alan and Casey O'Mara, who is the VP of Worldwide Business Development and Global Alliances at JFrog. They talk about the inclusion of JFrog on AWS GovCloud and Azure Government Cloud, which enables organizations that use the JFrog technology. They now can use Artifactory and X-Ray on those clouds, which is really great for the government space. Let's give this conversation a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest for this segment is Casey O'Mara, and Casey's with JFrog. He's one of the frogs. Hey Casey, welcome to TechStrong TV. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Alan, on TechStrong TV. Excited to be here.
Excellent. I like that Seattle kind of print back there behind you. It looks cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I run the Seattle Swamp here in Seattle, so. Yeah, very
absolutely looks very good. So Casey, we've got some news from JFrog to report. I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you tell our audience.
Yeah, so we're super excited to announce that we can launch Artifactory and X-Ray on the government clouds. And what that means is we can now launch into AWS GovCloud US East and West, along with the Azure Government Cloud in Arizona, Texas, and Virginia now. So we're super excited about being able to do this, not only for the government, but also for regulated industries that want to launch into those government clouds.
Absolutely. And then, Casey, that's an important thing sometimes I think is lost on people. We used to advertise, I co-founded a company that made a NAC solution, a network access control, and we used to advertise it as military grade network access control, because a lot of, especially heavily regulated industries or industries where there are certain performance parameters they need to be mindful of, they also seek to use these government certified or government quality level solutions, right? And so when you do something like this, it's not just the federal government that is a potential customer, but there's state, local governments, there's highly regulated industries, there's foreign, non-U.S. governments as well, that if it's good enough for the U.S. government, it's good enough for them, and there's so there's a whole world there. But of course, Casey, there's for those of us who have been in the government IT space, we know kind of what the what the standard operating procedure is, what the mission is, as we like to say in government, right? What's the mission? But for those who aren't, they may say big deal, so they're on a couple of places at AWS and Azure, right? Explain if you can, take a little time, explain to our audience what goes into getting this kind of access.
That's a great question, and you're absolutely right. Before I kind of jump into that, there's not only the government space, but you've got the state and local, you've got the education space, but we also have had a lot of customers come to us, Alan, and say, I wanted to be able to deploy into these. They have higher security, they have encryption at rest, they've met a lot more of the stringent standards, and I want to put my IP in something that's more secure, that isn't just a public, cloud, but it's kind of that next step, which has more security in it. And the different procedures that you need to do to get in there are stringent. They scan your entire product and make sure that there's no critical or high vulnerabilities, all the way down through mediums and lows. So you really have to make sure that when you look at those vulnerabilities that are in your product, that they don't exist, or you have an explanation to them as to why or why they don't affect you being in there. And you have to have those all remediated. And those take some time to get everything out of your product, have it meet the stringent standards that are required, and then be able to get that kind of certification to be able to deploy there. And you can take comfort or solace, if you will, in knowing that when you deploy Artifactory or X-Ray into there, that you're running with a product that has been scanned and that doesn't have those vulnerabilities in there. Obviously, as you know from the news, there's companies out there that have deployed things with vulnerabilities, and it's impacted a lot of things, not only on the public side, but the government is even announcing that they're doubling down on looking at DevSecOps and looking at security within things deployed within the government. So this is a big concern, not only in the public sector, but also in the government sector as well.
I agree with you 100%. I want to make clear for our audience, because I don't want anyone to think we're misleading them, right? Mm-hmm. So there's AWS and Azure run, is it called GovCloud?
So it's GovCloud in AWS, and Azure calls it Azure Government Cloud, is how they specify both of those. Right.
And when you talked about certified, there's different levels. I remember I spent a lot of time, for instance, down at Fort Huachuca, which is on the border of south of Tucson, going toward Mexico, at their information assurance certification labs. Mm-hmm. That was my project at Still Secure. And so I know what's involved there. when you say that all your vulnerabilities scanned, everything else, was it an information assurance, like formal certification, or just, a certificate before you can be deployed? What, if you can talk about it, don't say anything
Sure.
out of school here. We'll all get in trouble.
I'll be careful with what I say.
Yeah.
But it's not a formal certification in that sense of the world. There's obviously different levels that the government can secure things in, or have different federal level certifications. This is really more around the clouds and being able to deploy to those regions. So, like I said, with AWS Gov Cloud, that's both East and West, we can take Artifactory and now deploy it into those. We've met the bar to get into those. The same with Azure Government Cloud. We can now deploy into those regions. So if you go into our product today that's out there, you're able to now select that as a region that you can deploy our templates into, and they're allowed to be there. So this is kind of the certification or the bar that we've crossed as a first step towards going down that path that JFrog has taken.
Excellent. And so you mentioned it as a first step. Again, Casey, without making forward-looking statements, or doing anything that's going to get us in trouble here, what are next steps? What are potential? Where does this potentially go?
I think, I appreciate that you pointed out the forward-looking statements. Now that we're a public company, I have to watch out for that. But you can take some kind of guesses as to where we're going to go, or things that we're thinking about, because it is a high bar to get into both of these kind of government regions to be able to deploy into. It's obviously a lot of work on our end to start getting everything prepared and ready. And then the next steps are to go and make it official and start to kind of run that would be something that you would look at potentially next. But this is something that it takes time. As you may know from your days, nothing with the government comes quick, but you do have to run through their processes to be able to take those next leaps with the government.
Okay, let me ask another thing, which is, let's say, and we've got plenty of folks from the Fed space who watch TechStrong TV, interact with our sites. They hear this and say, "Wow, this is great news," because I've always wanted to use JFrog. Was a little concerned it wasn't available on the AWS Gov Cloud or the Azure Government Cloud. Now it is, and we can do something. How do they go about doing it? How do they, what do they have to go through a specific? Is there a contract? Is it just signing on to the Gov Cloud? How do you go about using it?
Yeah, we've made it really easy. So one of the things that we've done is you can go out to both marketplaces today. You're able to go to our Artifactory and X-Ray products. We have, Artifactory. We've got a number of different templates that you can deploy in depending on the cloud. But now what you're able to do is you're able to select those regions as a place to deploy to. So those will now appear when you select JFrog, Artifactory, and X-Ray. That is now a region for you to deploy to as part of our offering. So there's nothing new that our customers would need to do other than to select those regions as a deployment option, deploy it, and then of course these are BYOL templates, or bring your own license, where you would come to JFrog, get a license, and be able to deploy that directly into the region and apply the license. So it should be no more difficult than that for our users. To be able to enjoy it today. It's just affording them new places that are more secure to deploy to.
And are these licenses available under government contracts today, like a GSA or something?
Well, we do have a GSA contract, yes, that is out there that you're able to interact with today. We do have the pricing out there. We do have the schedule. We are updating and adding some new things to that schedule, but it is accurate as of today.
Very cool. That's great, Casey. So, Casey, at this point, are you heading up this government department, or whatever you want to call it, effort, or is there a specific gov team here that's working it?
So currently it is me, kind of based on some of my past experience. I'm former U.S. military as well. I've got some people on my team that used to do procurement within the government that are also helping. So it's not a full-fledged team per se, but there's a lot of us that have experience in delivering for the government and have done that in the past. And I think, as we look forward, we're looking to definitely build more in this direction. So more to come on that, Alan. Hopefully I can come back to TechStrong TV and talk a little bit more on that direction and what we're doing.
You have an open invitation anytime you want. We like our friends we like the frogs. Anyway, Casey, this is big news though, and I think this is also part of the natural maturation of organizations, right? Because there are some organizations that go gov first, right? They'll do government and then go do private. Few and far between, because it's just not an easy path. But for those organizations who do really well, in the private sector and then turn their sights on the government, especially the U.S. federal sector, as you're learning, as you've been through now, as you've seen in the past, it's a process. It's a time-consuming, expensive process. But this is why, things worthwhile don't come easy sometimes, right? You gotta earn it. And congratulations to you guys for setting up for this accomplishment and for heading down this road.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, no, it's an exciting road. I'm super happy that JFrog, with our great success with developers and with our developer community, can now extend that all the way out to our government friends. I've had a lot of people tell me they're excited that JFrog is in this space. They're excited to have us as an option to be able to deploy into government environments. And for DevSecOps, it's becoming a bigger and bigger topic. And they would like to use Artifactory and our platform to be able to secure government workloads. So very, very excited on this direction and happy to be able to bring that to our customers.
Fantastic. You know what we forgot to tell? If people want more information, Casey, where can they go?
So if they want more information, obviously they can go to the marketplaces directly. There's support links there. There's different things on that. We're also going to have a blog out, I believe, later today. That's going to be out there on jfrog.com. And then, of course, we'll have some materials in our documentation on those environments as well. But it should be as easy as, if you deploy Artifactory today or you plan to, just selecting that as your region with our templates to deploy to. So hopefully not a lot of lift for them. We've tried to make it as easy as possible to get up and get started and deploy into those environments. So again, always happy to hear feedback and let us know, but we'll put out a few different things for customers to discover that as well.
All right. Excellent, Casey. Thanks for reporting in on this. Keep it up. Come back and keep us appraised of the progress, okay?
That's a deal, Alan. I'll take you up on that. When we're ready to do the next, TechStrong TV will be the first to know.
Very cool. Casey O'Mara from JFrog here. JFrog available on AWS GovCloud and Microsoft's Azure Government Cloud here on TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us, Casey. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Alan. Talk to you later.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Next up, we have a conversation between Alan and Jeffrey Keyes, who is the VP of Product at Plutora. They're talking about the newly formed Value Stream Management Consortium, what it means for the industry at large, and what it means for value stream management. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment here. My guest this segment is no stranger to our audience. It's Jeff Keyes of Plutora. Hey, Jeff, welcome. How are you, man?
Wonderful, fantastic. Life, this is awesome.
You know what? One of the things I think a lesson people need to learn, I saw this today. Whether the glass is half full or half empty, be happy you have a glass with something in it. And
Very true.
So yes, life is good. Better than the alternative, I think. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Jeff, everyone in our audience, of course, knows you from Plutora. You've been a frequent guest, contributor, sponsor, panel member on webinars and events that we do. But if someone's watching out here and they don't know you and they don't know Plutora, why don't we start with maybe just a quick kind of, hey, this is who we are, what I do.
You bet. So I have been with Plutora for about 3.5 years now. Plutora is a value stream management platform, and it's now defined in the industry. Gartner's out there, Forrester's out there. It's kind of cool to see it all come around. We ingest data across the tool chain, aggregate it, pull it together, have some workflow and management and orchestration, and then provide a ton of analytics on top of it.
Absolutely. And you're right, Jeff. You know what? When you and I first met, I guess about 3 years ago, value stream management, I knew what it was. And I'll be honest with you, I knew what it was because it was something that IBM was keyed into early on in DevOps. They used to run these whole value stream management workshops. Mm-hmm. And really, my friend Sanjeev Sharma and Mustafa Kapadia, they did it for some of the largest organizations in the world because you had to get your hands around this.
Absolutely.
But to a large extent, Plutora was kind of a prophet in the wilderness, right? Preaching.
That's exactly right. We got our start there, right? Gartner breaks the category down into value stream management platforms and then value stream management delivery provider or value stream delivery provider. We've always been in this, hey, we don't want to have a planning tool, an automation tool, a deployment tool. That's not our gig. Our gig is we're a control plane above. And we've stuck with that completely. What's interesting is the industry's moved forward is people like the lights are going on for people like, oh my gosh, let's stop worrying about, there's life beyond the DORA metrics.
Yeah, I amen to that. And maybe we need to update the DORA metrics, but that's a whole other thing. I'm not here, right?
Yep.
But value stream management has come to the forefront, right?
It has.
A lot of companies are now recognizing just really how important it is it goes hand in hand. It's a chicken and the egg thing. With the maturation of DevOps and pipelines and software development life cycles, tools that people are using, you kind of until you had all of that kind of infrastructure, if you will, the value stream management stuff, right, was a little bit of a problem or an answer in search of the problem.
Yeah,
Now it's painfully obvious.
It's funny too because it's so painfully obvious. Everybody's marketing team across all the vendors are like, woohoo, this is great. We got a new there's toy. Money in them hills. Let's, we do value stream management. We're a value stream delivery platform and off it goes, which is why we're here to announce a new consortium. And
cool.
The consortium is really a big deal. Stop me when you haven't heard one of these company names: TaskTop, Digital AI, ServiceNow, IBM and HCL, Plutora. When would you ever think you would hear 5 companies like this all come together under one umbrella. Well, you are right now, and the point of that is the consortium serves as a central hub of information and education, not about marketing, not about, let me see what so-and-so is trying to have their bent that's going to try to get me into whatever. This is about education pertaining to practice and adoption of value stream management.
I get it. So it's the Value Stream Management Consortium.
Yep.
There's 5 corporate members who are probably the leading vendors in this space.
You got it.
Is there a website? There's a website, I assume.
There is.
Always is.
There always is. Yeah. So the vsmconsortium.org, and on it with the press release that will have come out is it includes a lot of links and quotes and things for education and practices. I mean, the goal here is we have to change the mentality. One of the biggest pieces you'll want is we're going to do a state of value research. And so
Great.
Grab the link to the research and, take the survey. It'll be out there broadly, and we'll give you the summary of it. But I think that research will summarize a lot of the things that we see. The consortium not only includes the vendors, but we've got industry folks.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. Beyond the vendors, who else is associated?
Absolutely. We've got a number of different folks in there that are value stream. They're consultancies. They're individual consultancies that are promoting the practices and so forth, which is great. So, and really, this will all look to accelerate the practice of thinking differently about how we want to manage delivery. One of the most interesting things, I had a story I wanted to share, which is kind of exemplifies it because it's recent. So last week, I'm on with a prospect who came to Patora saying, I hear you guys have the DORA metrics. I got to produce, what our change frequency rate is, our change failure rate, and our deployment frequency. And, how do I figure out MTTR? And I'm like, this is interesting, but, how often do you deploy? Well, we've got quarterly releases. Huh. Well, I wonder what your deployment frequency is with a quarterly release. And
I'm just going to take a wild guess, but go ahead. That's why they call me professor. But
I know. It's like you're kind of missing the point. But for some reason, he'd read the Accelerate book. And was like, oh yeah, this is where we need to do. We have to be an elite performer. I'm like, really? How long are you taking in your ideation phase? How long does it take? How long does it take once code's checked in and artifacts built to actually get to deployment? How long do you sit with, figuring out what work you actually do before things get urgent, and all of a sudden now you got to get it done? It really highlighted the point that there's such a disconnect between the dev leaders who are focused on outputs and processes, and the business, which is focused on speed and outcomes. Dev leaders are talking about story point, defect density, burn downs, what's my RIS. The business is talking about time, revenue, what's my retention. I'm a product guy, right? My CEO is like, what's this doing to my NPS score? How am I impacting my conversion rate for onboarding new customers? How do I improve that? And because there's such a disconnect, there's a C-suite that's like, I'm so frustrated. Let me just make sure the guys are being efficient. And so now they're going to just look at waste. There's a way we can align all of focused more on the flow of value and reducing the constraints of getting from idea to production. That's what matters. Look at the whole thing. And we talked through the Jonathan Smart, PMO is dead, long live the PMO, and a few other aspects of efficiency, the work types and breakdown. But all of that is just, it exemplifies why, as an industry, we have to get around this idea that we can't have transparency into the development engine. We can't have any predictability. We don't have a way to manage across these heterogeneous teams. You do. This is the practice of value stream management. Apply a control layer. We have software that helps you with this. That's the story. Fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. Jeff, I think part of the issue is, no knock, as I said earlier, no knock on DORA. But let's face it, right? A lot of that DORA work was done over the course of the 7 years of gathering data from the State of Internet report, and it's now 2-3 years old, and it's been an interesting 2-3 years.
Yep.
So you got to wonder, does that, how relevant is all that? But more importantly than that is we have shiny trinket syndrome in technology, right? Where it's like, and I think that's partly because we have so many men versus women, and you wave something shiny in our eyes, and we're like, fish jumping, So the DORA survey, the metrics, is something that, simple answer to hard questions. Or simple solution to hard problems. So let me figure this out. No problem. I got a formula for that. Right? And you're just going to plug in X, Y's, and Z's here, and I'll tell you where you are and where you're going. And, we continue to need to learn that sometimes there are not simple solutions to complex issues. Right? Sometimes you dig in a bit into these things. And so I applaud to a consortium like this that's going to jump in. You mentioned some consulting companies. You mentioned some of the top vendors. What about recruiting some organizations that have, kind of wrestled with this monster and come out the other side?
It's yes, there's a roadmap of more to do, because certainly there's no end of need of the big consulting organizations. There's some existing foundations that we've been chatting with, but step one is to get launched. And then we can expand out into looking at the financial management of IT and why are they not having meta transparency, or the practice of adoption of the actual, how do I actually manage these different value streams as they're going through and the change? Will be the relationship of people that are out there scaling agile, if you will, and these certifications on their journey to more DevOps and agile ways of practices. All sorts of interactions that are planned. Step one is just kicking it off. I find it interesting too, looking at the diversity of the vendors that are here, from TaskTop that probably has their roots in integrations, Digital AI with their roots in planning, ServiceNow that completely caters to the ops world trying to reach left, and HCL with the release orchestration, Plutora as just a straight man. It's not that any of the vendors here are bad or better or worse. It's just we all come at this from such different perspectives, and that's all good, because the end goal is the same: transparency and management of heterogeneous pipelines. And being able to pull this together opens the door for all sorts of relationships with people as they're looking to mature their ITSM practice, right? Moving beyond ITIL, as they're looking to move beyond release management. That's one of ours, right? Hey, if you've got legacy release management, you're our best friend, and we can help you move from there to a better one. If you're heavy on the planning and agile side, Digital AI is your guy. They're going to love you, and you're going to speak scaled agile. And if you're really focusing on, I got to really interconnect my tool chain. Well, that it's just funny as you see all this stuff comes together, and there's all sorts of other places that will be consulting and practice management around maturing the management and flow of software value in companies.
Got it. Jeff, what about the governance of the consortium? How is that being set up?
So there's a member, there's 5 board members, period, with currently 2 cohorts. And so we have an outreach cohort and a research cohort. With each of the vendor companies, we have a board place as a founding board. It'll expand out quickly as right after we launch. There's already interest from other vendors that want to jump in. We'll have other consultancies and so forth that'll also pop into the fray. The research cohort is focused on the state of value and other research that we'll do to expand the practice. It will, have a lot of things that we'll do. We're looking for an annual state of value, and there'll be other aspects that we'll provide research and solutions to, kind of following a similar vein that have been done from State of DevOps, State of Agile, kinds of reports, and using those as a metric that people can gauge themselves against as you're looking to adopt these things. The outreach cohort has been working on membership and some of the bylaws and things that are involved. How do we best tell this story and get people adopted? Presumably, we'll have other cohorts that we do in the future, things from certification and training, other kinds of partnerships that we'll do. All that are things that have been discussed, and we'll work on implementing as we expand.
Look, I love the idea of this. I think when you can get vendors working together along with consultants and end users, we all are better for it.
Yeah.
Right. Competition is good. Don't get me wrong, because competition, brings out the best in everyone. But especially, as I said, you got complex issues that don't necessarily lend themselves to easy answers. Right. And so you got to look at this thing, every which way from Sunday. And this sounds like a great thing. Congratulations on helping found this, Jeff, and getting this thing started. Come back and you're going to tell us more about, as you guys are making progress here, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool, man. Jeff Keys, Plutora, about the founding of the Value Stream Management Consortium. And it's yep. Give me that URL one more time so we don't mess it up, Jeff.
vsmconsortium.org.
Excellent. Hey, man, thanks, Jeff. Good work. Keep it up.
Thank you.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up in our Something Old segment, we have a presentation by Stephen McGill, CEO of a company called MuseDev. He talks about the evolution of technology from the academic research labs into our everyday lives, and talking specifically about what's happening in the space today that might make it into the mainstream tomorrow or even later this year. Programming languages, IDEs, security tooling, AI, and more. All great stuff, and it's a great presentation. Let's give it a listen.
Hi, I'm Stephen McGill. I'm going to be talking about how technology transitions from the lab to the mainstream and what that means for 2021 and the years beyond. In particular, I'm going to take a look at artificial intelligence, various things that are happening in that domain, and then how that domain is intersecting with software development and really pushing forward technology in that space. So first, a bit about me. I'm CEO of MuseDev, which is a startup that builds a code analysis platform that helps identify security, performance, reliability, and issues in a way that works as part of the development and DevOps process. I came about this by way of the research area. So I started out in research. I did my PhD at Carnegie Mellon in program analysis, computer security, software analysis, and then transitioned into industry later. Got really interested in, tools, getting tools in front of people, writing software that millions of people can use. And so that's what I've been working on. But I've spent 15 and plus years really researching various technologies, program analysis in particular, but also some AI and machine learning recently, and then publishing in the software security space. I've also led research for the previous 2 State of the Software Supply Chain reports. So this was joint work with Sonatype, and really is a great deep dive into software security on the open source side, what that means when it comes to bringing open source in as part of your application. So definitely worth checking out, something I've really enjoyed. And that's really the theme that my research has taken lately is looking to industry, looking to usage of software and software development environments and workflows in industry, and how that's changing. So that's the topic we'll cover here today. And really the challenge I've been given, which is to predict, that's what this whole conference is about, predict where will the next breakthroughs come from? What will they be? And so in thinking how to answer this, I thought it helps to look back and see where have major computer science breakthroughs come from in the past, right? How did they come to be? Where did they come from? What path did they take? And then let's see what's happening today that might be at that point of industry adoption soon. And so if you look at the breakthroughs over the last 15, 20, 25 years and what's in widespread use now, a lot of this technology dates from research in the academic world in the 1960s and 70s, and in some cases even before that, by the people that I have on this slide and many, many others. And so I want to give some examples of that first, just to sort of paint that picture of how does technology transition and what does that entail? And maybe talk about some things that maybe you didn't know the history of, and it's interesting. So the first one that I want to start with is generics. Thinking in particular about the Java language, but these come up in other places as well. And if any of you who have been coding in Java for a long time remember sort of the before times, before there were generics in the language, and what that was like, and sort of the associated pain, and then how the environment changed when support was added for this. So, first of all, what is a generic? It's just a way of writing code that it doesn't care about the particular types that are involved. It just talks about the capabilities of those types and what they need to support. So, maybe you have a collection and you don't care what type of things are in the collection. It's a set, but you don't care if it's a set of integers or a set of strings. Or maybe you have a library that does some communications, and so it needs a communications channel. But as long as it can connect and transmit data and receive data, then that's fine. A local socket, a remote socket, any sort of protocol works. So when you want to write code like that, first of all, writing code like that is a huge efficiency boost, right? You can write much more reusable code. And so anytime you can reuse well-tested code instead of rolling your own implementation, that's a huge benefit. And so it really helps with, productivity and performance and reliability of applications. And the trick really, and what made it take a while for this to happen with Java is you want to be able to do this in a way where you can check your work, right? Java is a typed language. If you do something wrong, the compiler points that out. And so how do you do this generic programming in a way where, in that communication is the example I gave, if you pass in a communications channel that's one way instead of two way, the compiler will notice and will complain, right? So the underlying technology that supports this, and here's an example of this, by the way, on the left, it's just sorting a list of integers and how it looked before and after generics. Right now, you can say this is a list of integers. Before it was just a list of, you can use objects because Java support, everything's an object, so you can always sort of cast up to that level. But then you lose that safety and that type checking from the compiler that I mentioned. So where does the underlying technology from this come from? It dates back actually to a paper by John Reynolds in 1974, and there was a sort of concurrent work by Girard around the same time frame. Both of them were independently exploring, how do you determine when you get this right and when you don't? How can you have a language that supports writing these generic functions? So that the term there is a polymorphic function. And so if you look in the text, they say, we can conceive of a polymorphic sort function, which for any type T accepts an array with elements of type T. It needs an ordering predicate if you're going to sort, right, whose arguments must be of type T. Then it produces an array with elements of type T. So this is very much the same flavor as the example I have on the left involving sets. and present in this 1974 paper. And now this same technology underlies generic programming in Java, but also in C#, Rust, Swift, TypeScript, right? Languages that are in widespread use and adopted, very widely in industry. And actually, the concepts date back even further than this. This is the first example of talking about the algorithms that you need to use to enforce this checking in the compiler, supported in the compiler. And under the hood, it's very complicated. So this is an excerpt from a different paper that talks about the mechanics of how you check that these types are right, that you're passing things around and composing things in the right way. And it gets very complicated. But what's cool, and I think what enabled this to make its way into so many languages and have such an impact on industry is you can implement this in a way where that's all under the hood. That's all hidden from the end user. The end user can make productive use of this capability without understanding everything that's going on behind the scenes. They just have to understand, I just need to describe what this type has to do and then just use those methods. And then, the compiler will figure everything else out. Another interesting example of this is garbage collection. So this is another feature that has, taken over the world from when you look at programming languages today. Java, JavaScript, Python, Go, Ruby, PHP, Perl. Most languages that we use today are garbage collected languages. And this concept originates back in 1959 with John McCarthy's work on Lisp. Right. So it was at MIT. He was, investigating, developing Lisp, one of the first functional programming languages, and the machine and virtual machine to support that. And then garbage collection was introduced as a way to simplify memory management. It took some time for technology to catch up to the point where we could do garbage collection efficiently enough and in a scalable enough way that it could make its way into mainstream languages. And computation had to advance to where we're not so resource constrained as we were in the 8086 and before days. But it's really become a concept that now is so useful at such a small efficiency cost and so easily implemented in these various systems that it has become, in a large extent, the standard. Another example is first-class functions. So these, I think, I would say these have made their way in more recently, right? If you think about the Java example down here. So this is spawning a new thread in Java by just passing in a function that you're constructing right there, some function that just prints out hello. That syntax is much more recent, but Python and JavaScript also have support for this. This idea that you can simplify code and again, take better advantage of reuse if you allow functions to take other functions as arguments. So once you have that capability, in that Python example, it's taking a list of names, John, Sue, Kevin, wants to say hi to each of them. And so instead of having a loop that's iterating over those and taking each one out and adding hi and then maybe constructing another list, there's just a single one-line expression that says, I'm going to apply map, which is this function that takes a function and applies that function to each of the elements in the list. I'm going to use that as my mechanism. And this actually goes back on this concept of first-class functions and functional programming goes all the way back to Alonzo Church, who did this work in the 1930s. Right, so those are some sort of examples where it took a long time for these concepts to make it into industry usage. I want to give one more example that is different in the sense that it transitioned much more quickly. And I think this is happening more and more. We're seeing the time period between an idea being explored in the academic realm and it's making its way into industry use, that's really shortening. And so we can see this with gradual typing, which is this concept that says, instead of having to pick an untyped language or dynamically typed language to pick your favorite terminology, but something like Python or JavaScript, where there aren't you don't specify types, you can get runtime type errors. The compiler is not doing all that checking for you. The idea of choosing between that and choosing between something like Java or C++, where you have types and the compiler is checking your types, that it used to be the case that you had to make that choice, right? What gradual typing does is it says, well, we're going to support a middle ground, right? Where you can start untyped, just write the code that you want to write. this can be very useful when you're prototyping, you're sort of iterating rapidly on early versions of the code. You're working with a small team where everyone just sort of lives and breathes this code and understands how it works, right? You don't need a lot of annotations. You don't need that support from the compiler as much. And then, as the project grows, as you learn, what the interfaces should be and things start to get pinned down, you can start describing that using types. And then when you do introduce types, say, this is an int, this is a string, this is a function from a string to something else, the compiler will go in and be able to make use of those and point out problems and areas where you make mistakes. And so this work started just in 2006 with Walid Taha and Jeremy Seek. And just 6 years later was already making its way into usage. So we have now many examples of this. Google's Clojure compiler for JavaScript, TypeScript, which is supported by Microsoft, a gradual typed system for JavaScript, MyPy for Python. Pyre is another system for Python out of Facebook. Facebook produced the Hack language, which is a gradually typed version of PHP. And then most recently, Stripe has developed Sorbet and open sourced that, and it adds gradual typing to Ruby. And so, you can see all of these examples of this concept just making its way into systems that people use in industry all the time. And you can see the industry support of those systems, right? Most of these systems that I described are supported by large technology companies. And so it sort of speaks to both the need in industry, the value of these approaches, and it's a big part of why it transitions so quickly. And there's other examples too, relational database systems go back to relational algebra work from the 1970s. Hypervisors originated with time-sharing systems in the 1960s and 70s. The internet, sort of probably the most commonly known example of this, originated with ARPANET research in the late 1960s, sponsored by the Department of Defense, and then eventually made its way, it became the public internet. So there's all these examples of work starting out in the research lab and then making its way and having a huge impact into industry. So as we look forward to what's next, I want to look at some of the things that are being explored in the lab right now, and evaluate, are they on the cusp of transition, right? Do we think they'll have an impact on how we develop software, how we work day to day in 2021? And I want to focus on artificial intelligence because, there's been a lot of work in this space in general, but especially in the area of software development, software engineering. There's been a lot of people looking at the intersection of artificial intelligence and software development to see, how we can really substantially advance how we do things like code search and code completion, error scanning, or even code generation. So let's start with code search and completion, and let's talk about how we do it today, right? So if I want to write some new code in Java and I maybe don't remember exactly how the library I'm using works, I can go to the documentation. This is the Java util linked list documentation. I can see the inheritance hierarchy there. I can scroll down and I can see the methods that are involved that are supported by this class. And then I can, try and find the method that looks like what I want and see what types it takes, and then go look at those types and sort of chase down these documentation threads. You can do the same sort of thing in Python, right? It has a great documentation of the standard library and add-on libraries. This is the documentation for the date time library. Same sort of process works here, right? But this is a very sort of high overhead process, right? And, maybe it's what you want when you really want to learn how to use a particular library. But there's some common tasks where it's really overkill, right? I want to convert one type of thing into another, or I want to just access some field of some larger structure. I know this value I want is in here. I just need to pull it out, right? And I don't want to remember all the details of that library. I don't want to go have to learn something new that I'm only going to use this one time and then forget, right? So here's an example, for people who are expert Java programmers, this will be old hat, right? But when you're first starting out with Java, I think a lot of people remember sort of the machinations you have to go through to convert various streams into other streams and buffer things and sort of construct ultimately the thing that you want when you're doing I/O. And so this is an example of opening a text file and then pulling data out of that. And so you have to construct a file input stream, pass it to a buffered input stream. And, how do you know that that's the thing you have to do? Well, Maybe you search for Java file input, you find out that file input stream is a way to do that. And maybe you know that buffered input streams are important for efficiency, and you look at the documentation and find out that buffered input stream takes a stream, and file input stream is an instance of string, and then you sort of chase all that down, make sure it works, and then write the code, right? And then run the compiler, see if you got it right, go through that loop. Wouldn't it be much better if you could just describe the context, right? Say, I'm in this context, I'm writing this function foo. It takes a file name as input, and I want to construct a buffered input stream out of something that I construct from what I have available, which is this file name, right? And then let the IDE fill in the missing piece, right? And so there's been work on doing this, on taking that context, seeing, what variables are around, what type do they have, what sort of functions, methods, constructors, can get you from A to B and ultimately construct that thing that you care about. Another way to approach it might be just to step back from code altogether, right? And say, I'm just going to provide a query. I'm going to say, I want to know how to efficiently read input from a file in Java. And then from that, get the relevant code snippet. So, in this case, the file, the code that reads from this file input stream and constructs the buffered input stream. Again, there's been work on this, going from English language queries to producing code snippets. And actually, this is not so different from a workflow that we're probably all familiar with, which is Stack Overflow, right? So a very common thing is you want to do something. Okay, Google, how do I do X, Y, Z? And then click on the first Stack Overflow link you see. And so this is actually what comes up for that previous query. It's a query. The query text doesn't quite match, right? Java, fastest way to read through text file, 2 million lines, but it's basically the same concept. How do I efficiently read from large files, right? Although it's not quite the same, because actually this query, if we look at this Stack Overflow question, this person isn't saying, how do I do this? I have no idea how to get started. They've actually written some code that works, and they're asking, is there a better way to do this? Am I missing something? Can someone, teach me more about this? And so that brings to mind an alternate sort of thing we might like to have, which is provide one way of doing it, read enough about it, figure out enough about the standard library, or maybe you just already know enough that you can cobble together a solution, but you're not convinced it's the right solution, right? So it's sort of like, this is what I did. What would a true expert in this space do? And so you might want to, in this case, get a suggestion saying, well, actually, you're constructing 3 different things to ultimately get to this buffered reader, but you can sort of do it in 2 steps. And also you're not catching this IO exception that can occur, right? Those are important things if you're trying to write, deployable, high quality code. And so again, there's work, in this case, out of Facebook, that can do this, that can take code examples, make suggestions based on better ways of doing that. And so, the question I want to ask is 2021 the year that this takes off, right? And I think there's evidence that it might be. First of all, there's multiple startups in this space. So Codota and Tab9 are both developing technology that's improved code search, that leverages AI and machine learning to let you more quickly find the code and code completion in particular that you're interested in. And there's industry use. There's substantial industry use at Facebook. 2 of the examples I gave actually were from Facebook, the natural language query and the, here's some code, show me a better way query. And then Amazon is also investing in using machine learning to improve code and find problems with code. So I think that one we might see in the next year. The next topic I want to talk about is one that's sort of near and dear to my heart, being at CEO of MuseDev, which is a code analysis company. What is possible in the space of applying machine learning to code analysis? I want to start as background by describing sort of how it works, broadly speaking now, which is you have tools that are composed of handcrafted rules, patterns, patterns to look for, to find bugs or find, inefficient ways of doing things. These rules are time consuming to produce, and they also don't keep up very well with changes in libraries, languages, frameworks. Those things are always evolving, and you have to do work to make sure that your rules are up to date with respect to those, right? If you think about trying to support 6 or 8 or 10 different languages, and then all the libraries for those languages. That's a lot of work. That's a lot to keep track of. They also don't account for differences in coding style, library usage, or maybe learn about custom libraries, right? Maybe you're using some open source, but you also have your own frameworks that you've written that your company is using internally. Right? They generally don't account for that. So what if you could incorporate AI to learn from open source, see how things are being done currently in the open source community, see how that usage pattern is evolving, learn from that and always have up-to-date rules based on that. Or learn from an organization's custom code. Again, see how people use those internal libraries and frameworks and incorporate that. Or make checks more specific to a given code base, right? Maybe this team is using this library in a slightly different way than this other team, and that has impacts in terms of what errors are likely to occur, what errors they care about, what sort of results they don't care about. So this is all becoming increasingly possible, and I want to give a couple of examples, of this and the sorts of things you can do with this. So one, this is from University of Colorado at Boulder, Evan Cheng's group. And they did some work on learning usage patterns from open source. And so you go and you mine open source repositories and you look at how different methods are being called, the ordering constraints between them, how data flows between those. And from that, you learn a pattern that says, this is how people usually do things. And then you can go look in the code for violations of that pattern. When are people doing something different? And maybe that's an error. And so this is an example from the Android SDK. Android has this concept of a fragment. It's a piece of the user interface. It represents like a page on the phone that you can interact with. And then there's a fragment manager that's responsible for keeping track of those, for processing actions and so forth. And if you want to update that fragment manager, replace a fragment or add a fragment, you need code like at the left. But in this case, there's a missing call to commit. So when you make a modification to the fragment manager, you have to commit that change. And if you forget to do that, then you don't see the result you expect. And so you can mine a pattern that says, all these interactions need to end with commit, and then detect violations of that. Another place where AI can be useful is in just configuration and setup of these tools. And this is something that we're actively working on at MuseDev, which is what error patterns, things like what error patterns are most relevant to your code base, right? Different teams care about different things. What bug types does the security team care the most about? These aren't necessarily the same as what the development team cares about, but it's important to track both, to be able to comment on both and report on both. How should I build this application? By build, I mean compile and generate, object files and executables from it. That's often an important step in analyzing the code, but it's not always straightforward. Or how does this app interact with its environment, right? Especially in sort of modern microservices-oriented organizations and deployment scenarios. There's a lot of interaction with the environment. A lot of input comes sort of not directly through files and standard in, but over the network, and you need to look across those environment connections, right? So again, sort of employing learning to learn more about the specifics of a particular code base and use that to provide better results. So I think this is an area that's also coming in 2021. Again, multiple startups in this space. Deep Code, it's not just us. Deep Code is another one doing great work in this space, leveraging machine learning to find errors in software. And it's seen use in industry at larger organizations. Facebook is taking this approach to analyzing their code. Same thing with Amazon. There's projects internally, things like Code Guru, that leverage AI to find errors in software and make suggestions to programmers. So we've talked about code completion. We've talked about bug finding. What if we didn't have to just lean on AI to write fragments of code, and we didn't have to worry about getting the code correct ourselves? What if we could just do full AI-based code generation, right? And so what does this look like? Sort of the ultimate high-level use of an AI for coding. And there's some interesting early reports on this. So if you go and look up, there's a lot of things that have happened. So OpenAI released this GPT-3 model, the largest language model so far. In 2020, a lot of people have been looking at that to see what's possible with it. And in particular, some people have been looking to see, so this is a language model. It generates English language text, is able to process text. But some people have taken a look to see, can we use that for generating code? Code is just a language too, right? So can we leverage the same model to code for us? And had some early promising results there. So in one particular demo, you can provide a high-level description of the application you want. So in this case, I want an input that says enter a to-do and a button that says save to-do, then show me all my to-dos. And then the AI goes off and writes the code. It takes a few training examples to get it up and running, right? You have to provide it some examples of what code looks like and how you map from language to code. But it very quickly figures out the connection and gets the pattern and is able to generate some of these simple examples. And so this was a demo done by debuild.co. So how soon is that coming, right? Is 2021 the year for this? Probably not quite yet. And I would say that just because, there's early work in this space. There's not a ton of companies working here yet. I'm not aware of public industry use of these sorts of models for this sort of process. It's certainly not things that have been pushed to production that developers are using every day, like they are in those previous cases I gave. And you still sometimes get surprising results, right? You don't get the application you want, and then you have to dig in to sort of see what's wrong. And so, there's the question, I think, with all of these of, do you have industry support, right? Do you see people using it in the industry day to day? Is there interest in the community? And are there clear benefits to the technology? So it's sort of like, there needs to be that level of investment. There need to be companies out there making, commercial versions of these products, or at least pushing, quickly towards commercial versions of these products. And it needs to offer enough of a benefit over the status quo to be worth taking up, right? And I think, the first two are there. The last one, it's getting there. So, maybe 2021 is not the year, maybe 2022 is, or 23. These language models are certainly progressing quickly. And I think there's a lot that could be done by leveraging those. So I'm excited to see where that goes. So one more thought I want to close with. Many of these coding examples use technology from machine learning based language and image processing algorithms. Like if you look at the underlying techniques involved, they come from the language and image processing community. And GPT-3 is a great example of that, a language model being used for coding. And one of my favorite examples of image manipulation with AI is this ability to take a photograph and then a piece of art and then give you a version of that photograph in that art style. So like, here's a picture of a town in Germany and Van Gogh's Starry Night. And then you get, sort of the artistic version of that city. So thinking about what that could mean for code, I can't help but recall the International Obfuscated C competition and some of the amazing code art that people there submit. So, maybe where we're headed is we can give a program, we can give an image that we want it to look like, and then we get this great sort of obfuscated, incomprehensible, but still executable C program that does the same thing and looks visually much more interesting. Or maybe GPT-3 based language models will let us be able to say things like, hey, Siri, make me an OCR program that looks like a fox jumping over a dog, which is what this is. Time will tell, or maybe this will become possible. Maybe this will remain the domain of human expertise, these sorts of artistic code expressions. But I'm eager to see which way it goes. And thank you for listening.
All right, next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. As always, Mike Jones hosts the podcast and has a great conversation with his guest. This time he speaks with David Lee, who is also known as DC Cybersec. They have a great talk about InfoSec, cybersecurity, all that good stuff. Let's give it a listen.
All right, we should be good. So, start out this week. welcome to episodes, I think it's 16, right? 16? Dude, time was like flying by, bro. 17, holy shit. Yeah, 17. So little history so that Dave can get caught up on where we've been, where we're going. TechStrong TV plays our podcast 3 times a week during their Digital Anarchist episodes, which reaches about somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people. So we've grown quite a bit, and we have at least between 20 and I've seen as many. Ryan, how many were on SIGINT? Was it like 80 people that were logged on active?
Sorry?
During SIGINT, during the one episode we had, it was like 80 something people logged on during that one.
Yeah, I think so, man. It was huge.
Yeah,
the biggest one was the one with Ghost, actually.
Yeah, Ghost is here. I don't know why Ghost is not activating his video and microphone.
He's being shy, mate. He's being shy.
Yeah. So yeah, we've had as many as like 80. There's Ghost, and we have like tons of viewers on the YouTube channel. One thing I want to get out of the way before we start: housekeeping. I'm about to switch questions to host only, to where your shit will come to me. For security reasons and to make this like a safe chat for everybody. Because we've had compromises before. So Discord and Zoom are not the safest platforms, but no platform is. So anyways, we've been going on for weeks and weeks, right? And we've had some really cool people coming on, David being one of them. Some of our podcasts have been like really great. So this week has been kind of busy for me. I apologize for not putting together like the technical hack for this week, but I've been dealing with working in like multiple time zones, England, US, taking 5 a.m. phone calls and getting talks ready for next week for Cybersecurity 2021. So with that being said, I'm going to run over some quick news real quick. It's nothing spectacular. It's the same shit, different day. Let's check it out really quick. So really, North Korea, they're doing threat needle malware, same shit. You know, they're getting financially sanctioned. So instead of complying with sanctions, they're going through malware and grabbing crypto coin and whatever they can through threat needle. And that's pretty commonplace. It's like normal. Cisco released security patches for critical flaws affecting its products, more than likely probably a lot of VPN products since the pandemic and work from home. And Chinese hackers using Firefox extensions to spy on Tibetan organizations. So I'm not really sure why Tibet and why China wants to squash Tibet. Let them be, let them chill. And, let's ease up on the cyber war against a bunch of Buddhist monks. It makes no sense. Let's see. Russian hackers targeted Ukraine authorities with supply chain malware. Big surprise there, considering they attacked the entire U.S. with supply chain malware. I'll pass on that one. Online trackers increasingly switching to invasive CNAME cloaking technique. So you're going to see a lot more of this now that people work from home. Registration is a little bit more of a pain in the ass when it comes to domain name registration, especially for companies and shell companies. And then you also have experts warn of notable increase in QuickBooks data files theft attacks. So that's not new. I'm not really sure why they think that's like paramount news, but it's really not news. Everything you know about evolving threat and ransomware. Ransomware going to be on the rise. I predict this like middle of last year when we started getting into all these lockdowns. So I saw an article today about the Italian mafia going to new neighborhoods to solicit protection, giving people protection in exchange for money from income. Kind of a fail because what protection are they providing, considering it's under lockdown in most countries? Businesses don't have to worry about protection any longer. So a lot of those companies that are, well, I guess mom and pop shops, right? They're willing to pay that type of money for protection because they don't understand that most of the cyber ops, most of the I guess attacks or criminal behavior against their companies are moving to the internet because of the pandemic and because of lockdown. We saw that like 200% in the UK in the first week of lockdown, first month. Phishing went through the roof. So, I mean, for the Italian mafia to request protection money on a street level, they're kind of behind, which is kind of disappointing in a way because I know a lot of the organized crime groups, especially like Poland, some of the other groups are resorting to phishing to augment their financial income to like help fund their operations and whatnot. And also online gaming. I did a video interview with Trident, which should be coming out soon, about gaming and grooming kids for cybercrime and organized crime, etc. So that's it for the news. So we do this really cool thing. It's kind of goofy, but it's new for the podcast. It's called the Cybersecurity Weather Forecast, according to your weather forecaster. And there's 99% chance of phishing and 100% chance of precipitation in the amount of making it rain all across the globe because of phishing. People are willing to give up passwords. Accounts payable are willing to create new accounts. And it all is because of lack of training. So with that being said, I am going to allow Ryan to introduce our guest because Ryan made the connection with our guest. We did have another guest as well, but that would have to be postponed. I don't operate at 3:00 in the morning. And for some of our guests, they wanted to speak to me directly. And at 3:00 in the morning, I can tell you that's probably not going to happen. But we'll go from there. So Ryan, take it over. Talk to us about David. David, this is totally casual. Welcome to the haunted house is all I can say. We have a blast. It's an open community. We look to give back to the community, teach people how to, infiltrate systems, test their own systems. Just free knowledge, man. Just like get together and really have a good time. There's no,
sweet.
Don't worry about censorship. TechStrong provides that. So we'll go from there. Ryan, go ahead, bro. I'm going to turn my video off.
So Dave, let's just get it started and just introduce yourself and give us a bit of your history, your background.
Sure. Okay, my name's David. A lot of people know me online as DC Cybersec now. I've been working in IT generally for around 15 years-ish, give or take, and in cybersecurity for around 6 of those years. I have a YouTube channel called DC Cybersec, where I try and teach people about what the daily life or the general feel and flow and thing is of cybersecurity on your day-to-day basis. So I try and stay away from things like tutorials because there's 1,000 other people who can definitely do that better than me. I just like to talk about, what it's like, what you're going to get yourself into. I think that's pretty much it.
So what inspired you to start the channel to start with? Like, how long has it been going for?
The channel's almost 2 years old. So it's, prior to that, I was working in a government agency in Australia. And I was talking about this just the other day. It was actually a little bit of a backflip from the level of censorship and clearances that I had in that job. So there was a lot of things like you can't say this, you can't do that. And then I got out of that job and there was still obviously the clearance and stuff that I had to keep in mind. And if you go back to my very first video, it's super sketchy. I'm looking around, I'm freaking out, and things have obviously changed a bit because now I share my LinkedIn profile with everyone. None of it's blanked out. It's kind of like a backflip reaction or a knee-jerk reaction to being locked down, to not being able to use anything for a very long time, to then just sort of, this is what I've got. So I think that's kind of why I created it. I saw an opportunity as well with a lot of people doing like technical reviews, and there wasn't many people doing CTFs at the time, and I thought CTFs were a great place to learn. So I started, the first few videos I did were talking about how to get into cybersecurity, mixed with different CTFs that I was finding, like the old school ones back then, like over the wire and stuff like that. So, yeah.
How do you find it being an influencer, a cybersecurity influencer?
I hate the word influencer.
Yes, thank God.
I think it's a load of shit, to be completely honest. I like helping people, and if that's what an influencer is, then sure, call me an influencer. But I'm here to help. That's all I'm here to do.
I'm totally with you on the influencer deal. Like I was approached by an AV and antivirus company and said, "Hey, we want you to be our social media influencer." And I'm like, dude, the last time I was called an influencer, there was bad before influence.
Yeah.
Exactly. Totally get you. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it is a bit strange actually. I just had someone contact me the other day about a sponsorship in a video, and he's like, "Oh, what's your influencer rates and blah blah." I was like, I don't have rates. I mean, what do you mean? What's my influencer rate? I can give you my hourly rate if you want, but didn't know what to say. I was blown away. So yeah, still getting used to this whole social media thing.
And it's totally shocking, right? So Ryan, I'm sure you can like relate to this, right? So when we started the podcast, none of us were influencers. At least I didn't think so. And all of a sudden, dude, it's like I'm getting approached for, hey, we'll pay you X amount of dollars if you say this during your podcast. And it's like, I'm an influence. Usually you want to keep your kids away from people like me. Like now I'm like a positive influence. That's weird. And with you looking like a Wookiee, that's difficult, bro.
Hey, I am who I am. So, Dave, what do you reckon? What's the biggest challenge to running your community? Like, what's the biggest like day-to-day thing besides answering what the best laptop to run Kali on is?
Yeah, the most challenging thing is steering people in the right direction. A lot of people come from like watching Mr. Robot and they want to be Elliot, and it's not quite like that. So fielding those sort of questions of reality versus what it's actually like in cybersecurity, especially in a more defensive or even as a pen tester, it's very different to the whole Hollywood scene. So fielding those sort of questions is probably the biggest one, and trying to get people in the right direction to doing things the right way, and not just going out there and throwing a DDoS on something. It's probably the most challenging part of it, to be honest.
Totally. I can totally see that. So Mr. Robot, let's delineate really quick between Hollywood and what actually happens like on a 9-to-5 job, right? So you have Ghost Exodus on, and he and I both have been involved in like confidential informant shit and been pursued by the FBI. That shit can kind of mirror entertainment and can kind of like mirror Mr. Robot, but the normal 9-to-5 job for cybersec is not what you see on TV. It's not the hoodies. It's not, the whatever. It's working, right? So that'd be a great
button-up shirts and GRC.
Yes. So let's dive into that really quick, right? So this is a perfect split of a panel. We have me and Ghost, and then we have Ryan and you. So let's talk about the actual 9-to-5, genre of pen testing and ethical hacking and serving that purpose.
Sure. I'll start with, I actually made my most popular video on my channel is a day in the life of a cybersecurity professional in a government agency or something like that. I can't remember the title. And the most common comments that I see is, "This looks boring. Is this what you do every day?" And it's a pretty realistic day in the life. Like I'm not messing about. People, I don't know what people expected that I was doing, but it's a lot of like, you go to work, you sit down in front of a computer for a period of time, you do the work, whatever it is, and then you go home and you go and eat dinner and chill out, and you do it again the next day. And in that video there was it was actually a mock GRC meeting, but it was very real to, that's what a GRC, it's me sitting there going, yep, okay, yep. Can we do this? No, we've got to go through more red tape. Okay, that's all right. Maybe next year. And it's just like that. Like, I don't know what people were sort of expecting to see. Maybe they're waiting for the black hoodie and the Guy Fawkes mask to come out and lots of green text running over my face. So I don't know. I don't know what they were expecting, but it's really not what it's like at all. I wish it was. That'd be cool. But
right.
Yeah.
So that's a good point, right? So the 9 to 5 usually doesn't look like what Ghost and I have been through. Even so,
Not really.
Even so, I've been looking for that binary text running in the background, the green shit, but I still haven't found it. So I must have taken a wrong pill. But even with that said, right? So there, with what we do as an industry, like pen testing, red teaming, analysts within a SOC, the closest I've found to what I did in the military and kind of what I did, like, on the legit side, was Pine Gap on Netflix, which took place in Australia at listening posts and doing signal intelligence. And that was pretty realistic. On the other end of the spectrum, Mr. Robot was very, very to the point and very accurate technically as far as exploits go.
Sure.
But the story behind it, of course, is Hollywood. And I won't get into the people who actually helped produce that show because, there's some bad blood there. But anyways, coming into security, cybersec, where did you start and what brought you to where you're at now?
I was working for another government agency at the time. They had a position for a network security engineer. So not quite cybersecurity, but I guess this is sort of like the way in for me. So before that, I was doing network engineering. So all the Cisco stuff, basically. Mm-hmm. And they had this project to cut over a bunch of firewalls, implement a SIEM, and go from there. And I had a 6-month budget, which ended up blowing up to a 12-month budget, as they tend to do. And so that was sort of the introduction. So I went in there in my interview. The reason I got the job is because they had a guest Wi-Fi. So naturally, waiting for my interview, jump on the Wi-Fi, do a couple little scans, see what I can see. I noticed that the networks weren't segregated at all. So I had full access on their guest network to their company files, which I thought was a massive, massive problem, especially because there's a bus stop right out the front. It's in the middle of the city, that place. And literally anyone could jump on that network. And that organization deals with, how do I say it without giving too much away? The legal documents for lawyers in the entire state that I'm in. So they're all about the compliance for lawyers as well as law cases against lawyers to find out which lawyers are good and which ones are shit, basically. So for that sort of information to be publicly accessible from not even inside the building, you can get on the Wi-Fi at the front. Massive problem. Yeah. So I brought it up. It was the first thing I said in the interview. They're like, "Hey, David," I'm like, "Your Wi-Fi's open." Before I was like, "Your Wi-Fi's open, guys. I don't know what's wrong with you."
So quick question from the guest Wi-Fi. I'm assuming it's like lobby level or maybe even like enterprise level guest Wi-Fi. So once you get to the guest Wi-Fi, if you do like a VLAN hop, right, a VoIP hopper into the data network.
Exactly what I did. Yeah. So they had separated it out by VLANs. There was no client isolation.
Did you use VoIP Hopper?
I didn't know.
Oh, okay. -1. one point taken away.
No, I was on my phone.
That works too. That works too.
Yeah.
So like that's pretty commonplace, right? So most of these companies that have vendors coming in have a guest network, set up your demo, whatever. Do you see that as being pretty widely spread within Australia? Because I know in the US, like especially in oil and gas, they all want to have this like dog and pony show where they put on like, these slide demonstrations and, product demonstrations, but they do it on the guest Wi-Fi. And I'm sitting there watching the guest Wi-Fi while I'm on the corporate data LAN and bouncing back and forth within a couple seconds. And latency is like 0. So do you see that a lot when you come to like?
It's becoming less and less common. I think people like network engineers are becoming a little bit more clued up to that. Maybe the Wi-Fi is your first point of vulnerability, but it was back then. That was like 5-6 years ago. It was fairly common. So
tell me how you came into contact with the haunted hacker. I know Ryan had a good bit to do with that. We have a following in Australia that I'll never understand as long as I live, but I attribute that to Ryan and his, go-getter attitude. So tell us about how you ran into our platform and our community. Through Ryan, basically. So I talk with Ryan every now and then. I think he came to me from my YouTube channel. I'm not sure, but we've been talking on Discord for a little while, and he's in the Discord server that I have, and we chat on there every now and then. So basically through that, every time someone talks to me, I have a little bit of a look into what they do, and Ryan's social media presence, especially on LinkedIn, is pretty massive. So it's not too hard to find any sort of information on what he's up to, essentially, without sounding creepy. It's not like I was stalking you or anything. I just wanted to have a look around. It's pretty likely, actually, right? So we started this movement. I guess October 31st was the first podcast. Halloween night was the first podcast. And we spread to 3 different countries in a matter of months. But I think what is attracting people to the movement and to the podcast is that, we want to spread knowledge, right? Free knowledge. We're not here to charge people. We have a Discord, we're here to provide. And I think from what I've gathered and what I've analyzed and what I've seen so far, that's kind of what you're up to, right? So tell me what you're up to on your side of the pond.
So I work for myself, so that pays my bills, essentially. Anything else is essentially a hobby. YouTube is a hobby. It's designed to help people to get into the industry and to learn what it's like in real time. So that's a short end of it, really. What
kind of success rate have you had? A lot of people have been hired through your channel, through the jobs listings you've got on there. You've got a pretty high hit rate.
I'd say the success rate of me getting people jobs is around 75 to 85%, mainly because they trust my opinion. So a lot of the local companies that I to or have worked for previously, there was a sort of long period in between those 15 years where I was bunny hopping jobs every 10 to 12 months because they were either the challenge had dried up, so whatever I was brought in originally to do could either be automated or was just becoming boring. And I'm one of those people who does get pretty bored, which is the whole reason I started this business on my own, is because I can just keep doing different jobs. So that works for me. But being stuck in one job for 12 months is a struggle for me. It's 18 months, almost impossible. 2 years plus, never going to happen. It just doesn't work.
Total nightmare.
Working... it's terrible. It really is the haunted hacker, literally. So working in those different places, I was able to I guess, put down my skills and I guess personality. I think they're more interested in my personality. I'm not like one of those show-offy kind of people. I just get the job done, and that's pretty much it. If they like to chat, I'll have a chat. I'm always keen to have a chat. But I try and keep in contact with those people because I love talking to people, basically. So, I keep contact with all those guys, and they've since come back to me since seeing my YouTube channel and saying, we see you've got a lot of students here. How many of them are local? And how many of those guys do you think would maybe want a job or whatever? So they trust my opinion on, that person's level of skill, because I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll say they're a bit green in, Linux admin type work, but they will break your Wi-Fi, no problems, or something like that. So yeah, it sort of depends what the job is to who I'm going to be talking to. There's a couple of people that I talk to more often than not who are in the government side of things, but finding people with the right level of clearance is next to impossible. And they're starting to expect it now as a minimum to get into an entry-level job, which is, for me, that's crazy. Because back when I went into government, they're like, oh, we'll pay for you NV1 and then we'll get you onto NV2 and whatever. And they'll just push me on from there. So, I mean, the clearance, I probably took longer to do the clearances than what I did actually work in that position for, to be honest. But so that's sort of the success rate and how I talk with those people. I still talk to them every single week. Every single one of those recruiters in IT or cybersecurity, as well as previous employers that I know Ryan's talked to one of those guys. But yeah, there's plenty of other. Yeah, he's a nice dude. But there's plenty of other places out there just like that sort of guy who I've worked with or push people onto. So another good example, other than Ryan, is a guy in Melbourne who had just got his OSCP. I made a video with him talking about his OSCP. No longer than 6 hours, I think, later, he was offered a job, just like that. So they liked how he talked. They liked how he's presented, and he had the credentials. So, I mean, yeah, as an advertisement model for people to get jobs, my channel's pretty useful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges I see as far as the industry goes is these certifications, these nonsense certifications. Like you can't get a job at a company unless you have a CEH. Piss on that. I've seen the CEH since version 1, and it's crap.
It was shit in 2017, and it's still shit.
It's still shit. So I took the test in 2005, I believe. So version 1. Yeah. So I took the test, no class, just decided to fucking roll in, do the proctor exam, passed it after a few printer crashes and computer crashes, finally got through it. But what I find is that these certifications are really making things difficult for entry level. We're seeing, they keep talking about gap of knowledge, right? The talent gap, which does not exist in my world. The gap that exists is when a company decides to hire and promote from within, right? So instead of hiring a entry-level position, they're raising the mid-management up to higher and leaving that position open and only hiring for mid-level, right? No entry-level. So it leaves everybody else out on the curb.
There's another problem here as well, which is that HR doesn't understand what they're recruiting for.
Exactly.
So, and that's the biggest problem that I reckon is here in Australia anyway. They're asking for things like, previously you just needed to have some sort of IT experience to get into a cybersecurity role. And that was fine. They'll then skill you up from there. But things have sort of started changing. They're now asking for an OSCP for like a SOC role, which it doesn't even make sense. But
for a SOC role,
SOC analyst, you need an OSCP.
Nice. Nice.
Why? Why? What do you need an OSCP for do a SOC? But anyway, I mean, like maybe like the Splunk Essentials, the free one, that would be more useful. But anyway, that's my opinion. And then now not just an OSCP, but they require NV1 clearance, or at least a baseline clearance with the government if you want to work in a government agency, which is no one has that. So then that means they're only employing internally, bringing people up.
That's the way it is. Globally. And
unless you know someone who can get you into the job.
Yeah. And that's really hard. So we've been fighting that globally for probably since I got out of the military. And the one thing I fought against was I had a TS, a top secret security clearance with an SCI polygraph, which meant that I had counter intel, had lifestyle, SCI, compartmentalized information. But even that was not good enough for some of the levels that they wanted. I got
turned down with a PV1 clearance, which is pretty much the highest one you can get here. I went after that government job. I still had my clearances. I was still valid. Went to another, it was a private industry, but they were doing subcontracting for different defense government agencies. And to get that job, they had required PV1, which I had, but they said I didn't have enough experience. I was like, what do you mean? I mean, I was able to get the PV1. So what else do I need? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the whole point, right? So the US, the UK, we all want people to join our companies, but we want them to have this level of clearance plus experience. It doesn't happen. And you're not going to pay somebody, $40K for a clearance, 10 years of experience, and street creds. That alone is over 100K. I don't care if you're dealing in pounds or US dollars. That's over 100K.
Oh yeah, those clearances don't come cheap either. There's even MV1 starts at around 30,000 Australian.
Yeah.
So, and to get it, you need to be sponsored by a government agency as well.
Yes.
So it's literally impossible.
Yeah. And we've seen that here, right? So I came from a clearance background. Of course, I made some bad choices and made some bad mistakes, and I'm probably not employable by the government forever. But even if I was, I would only qualify for middle management. What about the people who are trying to get into cybersecurity and trying to defeat that lack of talent, right?
They're pretty much shit out of luck.
Yeah, I mean, and that's global. When I hear people say, "Oh, we have a shortage of talent," no, we have a shortage of HR departments who actually know what the fuck they're doing, and that's bottom line. Period.
Yep.
And here on this podcast, we don't hold punches. Like it is what it is, and I'm just gonna say it. It's bullshit. Shortage of talent. Never. I just did a talk with Westminster University earlier this week for their students and alumni, and there's no lack there at all. There's just a lack of companies who are willing to open up entry level to take a risk for these new people coming in. But it's going to get to a point where guys like me, guys like you, guys like Chris Roberts, other guys, when you call upon us, we're going to be like, yo, have you actually talked to the people who want jobs in those entry-level positions? Have you talked to people who can help you in this time of crisis? No. You reach out to us because we're the de facto. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad.
I had 3 job offers this week for exactly, and I literally said the exact same thing that you just said. I was like, have you looked at these local universities?
Yes.
Because I had a talk with a couple of local universities earlier in the week, and there's a lot of skilled guys there.
Yes.
Lots of guys and girls who they're probably better at the job than I am. Why don't you get them?
Yeah.
And they're hungry. They're super hungry for it. They will learn so fast. Why get me? I'm an old dog. Just forget about me. Get someone else.
super hungry and clean backgrounds. Right.
Exactly. Well, that's the other kicker. Yeah.
You're not going to get me or you for the money you're asking for. And you're definitely not going to get Ghost, and you're not going to get Ryan for entry-level bullshit. Look at the universities, pull from that pool of people. And that's why I started the Inside the Mind of a Hacker, speaking tour, was to get to these universities and talk to these people and get them rolling, right? Get them interested in what we're doing so they can jump on board. But the industry, for some reason, the industry seems so hellbound on bringing people with no experience, no clearance, and trying to make them, fit a mold for 5 years experience. It doesn't happen. No. I didn't look. I actually had a company say, "Hey, look, I want you to teach our entry-level analysts everything you know." Dude, I don't have 20 years to teach your people or my people. If I had 20 years, I own my own company and we would be doing pen tests globally. Like it doesn't happen that way.
So that's actually a good segue onto owning a company in cybersecurity and working for someone else as well, I think.
Lay it down.
All right. There was a question from Will saying, what do you think the main benefits are to owning a business rather than being an employee? And initially, I would have said the freedom of time, but that quickly disappears. that's something that you sort of you lose that after a couple of months, or once you get a few solid clients in, that sort of disappears. I work all the time now. Yeah. So that benefit doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But I guess the major benefit is you can do things your way. So being able to write a report the way you like a report and making it a little bit more personal rather than the standard OSCP course that then gives you that report at the end that everyone uses on their pen tests. It's a good report for sure, but it's ugly. And being able to present something like that to just think of the people you're talking to and giving these reports to, they don't understand anything that's on that piece of paper. So if you give it to, just imagine you're writing a report for your mum or dad to understand, or maybe your brother or sister or whatever. That's sort of how I approach these reports. And being able to do it in that way, I found much more success than writing something super technical, because chances are they're not going to understand. You just put a disclaimer at the end saying if you want technical details on each thing that's been done, like the really gory technical details, I'll give them to you. But in most cases, I reckon 99% of the time, no one cares. They're just like, it doesn't matter, as long as it's protected. So.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at the evolution from Agile to DevOps to DevSecOps. Specifically, this article asks, have Agile and DevOps fulfilled the promise of delivering the best possible customer experience in the shortest realistic time frame? In an environment where more users are clamoring for more products and services, implementation of Agile methodologies is not just important, it is imperative. DevOps, meanwhile, has become another methodology by which organizations develop applications quickly. And although Agile and DevOps differ in their structures and approaches, they can work together to achieve the ultimate goals of speedy deployment and enhanced customer experience. DevSecOps is the next evolution, as more organizations look to address security during, not after, development. This article is a primer of sorts on how organizations can shift from Agile to DevOps to DevSecOps, all with the goal of providing the best possible customer experience and shorter deployment cycles. Next is an article about the role of AI in DevOps. DevOps is a natural target for AI-driven efficiencies, as it involves frequently repeated processes that generate mountains of data. So, like other domains that require decisions to be made based on large volumes of data, AI will play an important role in DevOps. There are two main points in the DevOps process where large amounts of data are generated, and where machine learning would be most useful when applied: testing and release and monitoring. This article goes into detail about how AI can be applied effectively in both areas to help DevOps processes along. AI promises to accelerate innovation in the areas where we currently use data-driven insights to improve the performance of DevOps tools and processes, the article notes. So the result will be even higher deployment success rates, leading to increased agility, better code quality and performance, and enhanced security. All right, over on Container Journal, we take a look at 3 considerations for debugging. Now, admittedly, debugging is not the sexiest of topics, but it is a major critical challenge for software developers. The shift to highly distributed operations in containerized cloud environments over the last year of the pandemic has further complicated the debugging process for many DevOps teams. In this article, Liran Haimovitch, who is the co-founder and CTO of Rookout, offers 3 ways to overcome the challenges of managing debugging in containerized environments. It's an interesting read and offers up some thoughts into debugging that organizations perhaps are not considering when trying to debug in containerized environments. And they're worth taking a look at. I'm not going to spoil the fun by telling you the 3 ways that Liran covers in his article. Check it out for yourself if you're interested. Next is an article on why Kubernetes is the king of containerized tools. Okay, that's a bold statement, but judging by the momentum that Kubernetes has experienced over the last few years, it's hard not to believe it. It is its ability to manage and scale containerized applications that makes Kubernetes a top choice over virtual machines and other provisioning software for boosting efficiencies and delivering business value. This article looks at length at the many facets of Kubernetes in the cloud-native space and how organizations can truly benefit from the technology. Business is becoming more unpredictable, and with that, the need for agile enterprise software is only increasing. Kubernetes-enabled software stacks unlock true flexibility and scalability for organizations while putting security at the heart of all deployments. Decision makers who want to future-proof their business against an uncertain future should take note of Kubernetes' potential. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at zero trust in a trusting world. I love that headline. It offers great insight into how the U.S. government has adopted the zero trust model of cybersecurity to protect its networks. On February 26, just last month, the U.S. National Security Agency, supported by CISA and the U.S. CERT, issued guidance in its document embracing a zero-trust security model. But while many consider the guidance to be late to the InfoSec party, as early adopters have been building applications and constructing their infrastructure to align with the paradigm for years, others will be looking at zero trust with new eyes. According to the NSA, the zero trust security model assumes that a breach is inevitable or has likely already occurred, so it constantly limits access to only what is needed and looks for anomalous or malicious activity. That's good advice. This article goes into detail how the NSA is adopting zero trust and includes some guidance from the agency, which includes integrating the zero trust concepts into your established environment immediately. It's good stuff. Finally, we have a look at how organizations can decentralize their cloud management. The agility, flexibility, scalability, and affordability of the cloud can be a boon to business, but they also introduce a host of security risks and potential vulnerabilities. In fact, cyber attacks on cloud services have soared during the pandemic. An analysis from more than 30 million McAfee Cloud customers revealed cyber attacks on cloud services increased by a whopping 630% in the first 3 months of the pandemic alone. More often than not, cyber attacks succeed because multi-cloud environments don't have adequate security policies in place. So what is the solution? This article offers up a multi-pronged strategy for tackling the security issues related to cloud environments, including how decentralization can mitigate many of the risks associated with cloud and help simplify cloud management. Easy for me to say. All right, that's it for today's headlines. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh batch. Until then, have a great day.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with just an all-star panel here for in recognition of International Women's Day, happening today, March 8th, which also happens to be my sister's birthday. So yay there. But I have on the screen with me Deborah Danielson, who is the CTO of Digital Guardian. And I also have Jill Oren. And did I get that last name correctly?
Norhan,
pronounce
yeah,
it?
perfect.
Norhan. Okay, all right. So VP of Customer Success at Devo. And I have Lara Meadows, who is a VP of Sales Engineering at Threat Connect. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. I know your time is very, very valuable. So I thank you again for being on the TechStrong TV with me today. I want to kind of circle back with you guys because it is International Women's Day, and there is an ongoing conversation about diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity and in IT. So, part of a conversation is kind of level setting, making sure that, how we all feel basically about that, whether things have changed, gotten any better, gotten any worse, especially in light of the pandemic. But I guess I did want to kind of kick things off by asking you about how do you guys feel about having to do a panel discussion about this topic? I mean, does it just drive you absolutely insane? Because I hear this and it just drives me up a wall. I just feel like, why are we still having these conversations? How do you guys feel?
Yeah, I think that's a great opening question, Charlene. I go through these waves about sort of being the token woman in technology. And sometimes I'm really enthusiastic about it. Sometimes I just honestly get really exhausted by it. I've been sort of in this position of the poster child for, women in tech for about 15 years. And, there are some times when I really just want to be a CTO. Like, I don't want to be a woman CTO. Mm-hmm. And I want the problems that we have here to just be solved so we can go on and work with the technology, which is the fun part. Right. But the reality is we are not there at all.
Yeah. I go back and forth. It's funny because I do agree that it's about who we are and what we've done and what our accomplishments are, but the conversation should be about when I started in sales engineering and engineering, there are too many times where I looked around the room and I'd go, oh, I'm the only girl again, only female in here, and I was like, okay, gear up, and had way too many inappropriate conversations being in the room. But it's been interesting to see it change over the years. And I see a lot more diversification, especially on the engineering side. But one of the things that I really do enjoy doing, though, is watching young women come into our company and giving them the power and giving them the help to guide them, and I see certain things, and am able to offer help and just be there if people need that. So I do find that I go where I'm like, no, I'm Lara, I'm an engineer. This is what I do, and know me for being my quality of work. And then I think, oh no, there's the mom in me who's like, oh, let's help you get better. So I do kind of jump between the two.
I found it's kind of ironic, actually, to be doing this panel because my company wanted to do an all-women's panel on security. And I was like, I don't want you to do that because I want you to focus on, what technologists and what cybersecurity specialists who happen to be women are doing in security relative to their field. And let's talk about that and maybe have a panel that includes a woman and let's talk about our work, right? Instead of having it be a panel of women. But I think you said something really important too, which is I've observed during the pandemic that women that I know seem to be disproportionately affected by the pandemic, by their work life, that are actually exiting the workforce in some cases as a result. And so then it makes me feel like, well, it's something that really does need to be talked about because I did have that sense like we were making some good progress, and then this feels like a bit of a setback. And so then how do you help?
That's actually a really great point because I was thinking about the same thing. It's like when everybody got sent home to work remotely, everybody kind of fell back. Well, not everybody. I can't speak for everybody, but I would imagine from what I've seen, the majority of folks kind of fell back into their traditional gender roles at home with the kids at home, working, doing school remotely. All of a sudden moms had to, or females had to be moms, and they had to do their work and they had to, support the household and everything else. And I think to your point, Jill, I think we kind of ended up taking a step back because we really hadn't advanced, and maybe as far as we thought, we had come, basically. And I wonder if the pandemic has actually kind of hurt females disproportionately because of those traditional gender roles. And I don't know what companies could do to kind of help, maybe change that, because obviously they can't tell us how to live our lives at home. But do you think that there are certain things maybe that organizations maybe need to be a little bit more aware of when we're talking about the female role in cybersecurity or in IT, and kind of being able to balance or juggle that, and what just maybe some of the things that they need to be aware of? Do you guys, how do you guys feel about that, as as far as the company support of the females in cybersecurity and IT?
Yeah, I think you make some really good points here about the impact of the pandemic on women in particular, particularly women with either children that need support or parents that need support, right? Because also on the women, in both directions. And I do know it's been a lot harder, during the pandemic for families to sort of navigate through this. I think the one hopeful piece that I have about this is, as we start to, exit with the vaccines showing up, we start to exit this quarantine and move back towards normalcy. Some of the things that I've really learned is that, time zone is the new geography. Mm-hmm. And we've seen so much success in working remotely and working from home, and how that's really leveled the field for people who are less traditional in terms of the way that they approach work. I have a small handful of people who are remote workers, some of them, women, some of them not women, and they were always somewhat marginalized while everyone is in the office. And when we went full work from home, we really saw how that could be a sort of a normalizing, effect. And I think, we're planning on staying sort of hybrid work from home afterwards. And I'm hoping that really supports more flexibility around, less traditional, work in the office, commute, go home, and, makes it easier for women and, and others to participate fully and not be disadvantaged as a result.
Excellent. So go ahead, Laura.
I was going to say, sorry. One of the things that I think will be really interesting coming out of this is the empathy that we have for people, right? The human side of people on our teams now. And what's interesting, because you have a kid walk through while you're on a Zoom with the CISO or something like that, and you go, sorry, and they go, oh, it's okay, it's no problem. And I'll tell you what, I was just talking with one of the guys on my team, and he was telling me that he and his wife every morning switch, look at their schedules and say, okay, who has to be on kid duty while, who has the more important calls? And he was very good in saying, sometimes he has to back out because his wife has calls. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how companies keep this element of, yes, there are people behind these employees, that with families, and understanding how that goes forward. And so just how we've extended this empathy and this compassion, I was very excited to see this going forward to continue.
And to pull that thread a little bit, I think the thing that I think is really interesting there is will that become a competitive advantage for companies to do it well, right? Because it's what I've observed across both men and women with the pandemic is a lot of people are taking a second look at their job situation and saying is this really where I want to be, and do I have the kind of balance in life that I want? And they're looking around a little bit. So I think if you start to look and you see places that say, well, yeah, we're comfortable with remote work, we'll do that all day. We don't care where you live, it's fine. That's going to become a cultural differentiator for companies like that. That's going to start to draw talent to them. I think men and women.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. And in our situation, I actually was working full-time remotely until the pandemic hit, and then I ended up moving, and moving to the town where this my company is actually based. So now I actually have to come into the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week to do recordings for TechStrong TV. So I kind of did this whole reverse thing. But to the point, luckily, I have support at home that my son is now going back to school full time. So I don't have a lot of the pressures that I know there are so many others out there who are, still kind of dealing with it. And even if it's not something that, that is on their plate, 8, 10, 12 hours a day while they're trying to work, I can see how it can be an impact to the way just the mindset is, I've got to do this, but I've got to do this, but I've got to do this. And I think it's really great for those companies that there are those companies out there that are so very supportive and saying, you know what, one day, a quarter, we're just going to shut down. Everybody's going to take a mental health day. We're going to let you do what you need to do. If you need to work from 10 to 6 and then then just log on, or just don't even give me any hours. Just tell me, if I have a meeting, you just be on the meeting. Otherwise you do what you need to do, and we'll just check in regularly. I think it's great that there are certain companies that are doing just basically trusting their employees to get their work done when they need to get it done, and accommodating their schedules. And I do love the idea of companies that are moving to these hybrid work environments or going all remote all the time. Do you think that that's also going to kind of maybe impact the way, not just companies as an umbrella term companies, but the traditional, if we go back to kind of that traditional male female role within the company and in society in general, do you think we're going to see maybe even an evening, if you will, or more balance between the responsibilities of the males and the females, both inside and outside the organization because of the pandemic? I mean, are we looking at the pandemic as the great equalizer, if you will?
I'm not sure if it's the great equalizer, but I would say my husband at least has a lot greater visibility to how much I work.
Yeah.
Whereas I think he before would have maybe kind of papered over some of that. And then now it's like, oh, you really put in a lot of hours. And I noticed that he's stepped up a little bit more to be more supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I couldn't balance all the home responsibilities and the school responsibilities and all of that unless I had the remote work option. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it would be literally impossible. So at this point, if I expect the situation to continue a little bit, it's kind of a mandatory thing for me.
I think what it's done really is create some visibility around it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure it's actually changed anything during the pandemic in the same way that, I think that adding this flexibility during the pandemic didn't necessarily change it, but I'm hopeful that it's going to have an impact, post pandemic. I think that high EQs in organizations are going to, a differentiator. And I think that the organizations that are, successfully sort of retaining the women in their workforce today are the ones that are exhibiting that kind of, emotional, intelligence around what people have to deal with and how hard it is to juggle both those personal and professional, responsibilities and obligations. I was also a work from homer for 10 years before coming into, to Digital Guardian. And so on the first day that we went work from home inside DG, I posted a document with 25 points about how to manage working from home, right? Because if you haven't ever done it, it takes some real work to get that balance between drawing the line between what's your home life and what's your work life. Otherwise, it just all blurs together, And I think, one of the things I'm so incredibly proud about at DG is that we actually doubled our employee satisfaction during the pandemic. Went from really unhappy employees to really happy employees. And that's because we're paying attention to them as whole people.
I think that's really interesting because I found, I'm sorry, I don't know who.
No, go ahead.
I think it's really interesting. I've worked from home also for 15 plus years. And I found that I worked round the clock, because I would go pick up my kids from school, I would feed them dinner, and then I'd hop online afterwards. And I found I was just working constantly. Someone would text me on the weekend, hey, can you? And I'd go get on my computer because I worked from home and it was easy to, access it. And I think with this, it's actually given me the ability to say, laptop down, I'm checking out for the night, I'm checking out for the weekend. It's also my company has allowed me to do that because we have a really good work-life balance. I don't really like that term, but so having that, but I think that that's one of the things that this has done too, is empowered people to understand that, yes, you can work from home, you can be productive, but you can also draw the line and say, okay, I'm not working now. It's time for me time. It's time for family time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also one thing that it also has done is kind of ramped up the empathy, if you will, for each other during the pandemic. No matter what your home situation is, no matter what how many people you have in your home, whether it's if you're caring for children, if you're caring for pets, if you're caring for your parents, it's everybody's got some level of responsibility. And I think before, especially as women, we were kind of expected to just do that, and nobody really needed to know about it. But now it's like boom in your face, and everybody understands the level of responsibilities that people have that maybe before they didn't quite realize. And so I think that people as a whole within an organization and outside an organization are being a lot more mindful about how they view people in their, in just the fact that they've got stuff going on beyond the company and beyond work. And I think that that's been a great, also, dare I say the word again, equalizer, but it's just kind of, people are a lot more understanding than they used to be. And I think that that's important for organizations as a whole, and also kind of helping put men and women kind of on a more level playing field, if you will, because if we're all kind of thinking on the same the same level, then from an emotional perspective and a more empathetic perspective, I think that we can all kind of really think of all of us as really being on the same team, rather than singling us out for our gender or our age or our race or anything, basically. I think if we all kind of look at each other as humans rather than a male or female or whatever, I think it's a win-win for everybody. And I think that the pandemic, if we do have a silver lining, I think the pandemic is helping us do that, understand each other as humans. So maybe next year, post-pandemic, knock on wood, we'll have a much different conversation when we get around to International Women's Day. But ladies, I do want to thank you so much for your time today and kind of just doing a little brain dump on your feelings around work and the pandemic and everything that's been going on. So thank you again for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Tim Jarrett, who is the Senior Director of Product Management at Veracode. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. I'm excited to have the conversation that we're about to embark on regarding developers and security, and namely the fact that developers really do need to, incorporate security deeper into their processes, and as such, their job description needs to change, as well as their educational focus. So I know we've been talking about DevSecOps for a very, very long time, and so many organizations, at least maybe before they adopted DevSecOps, have pretty much kind of taken on that, we'll bolt security on right before we push it out to production. It's and obviously a lot of organizations have discovered that really doesn't work very well. So
no, not so much.
So adopting the DevSecOps practices has kind of been that path that they've taken, but it's so much more than just adopting this shift left attitude towards security, don't you think?
It's a lot of things, and I think that the way I see it is that DevSecOps is the natural outcome of years and years of security coming in at the end and telling developers that they can't ship because there's a requirement that they need to meet that nobody ever told them that they had to meet, and never gave them the tools to meet in the first place, right? And told them at the last minute when there was no time to do anything about it, right? So just as software development teams responded to, kind of the challenges of waterfall by pulling QA into the team and making it a part of the process and then automating more and more of the testing, I think we're seeing the same motion happening, albeit much later and somewhat slower with security. The response that I see of most development teams is, if it's going to make my release, be at risk, I'm going to figure out how to address it earlier. I'm going to, and then I'm going to try to figure out how to do it so that it doesn't keep me from, doing all the other great stuff that I need to do to get the product out.
Right. So, but I do hear from other organizations and developers in those organizations who say, security is coming at me during the process, and I just do the big eye roll because I know whatever they're going to bring me, it's going to slow down my process. And I know right now there's still that disconnect between security and development, and I wonder if part of it is because when we kind of came up with this grand idea of DevSecOps, I'm not sure that A, we spoke with the developers, and B, we spoke with the security to say, hey, maybe we should do this. And if anybody ever actually sat down and thought about, well, when we're talking about DevSecOps, what exactly do we mean from a process point of view? Does it require a whole new mindset on the part of the security team and the developers, or are we looking at a whole other person, if you will, to kind of implement DevSecOps? I mean, how well do you think DevSecOps was actually thought out and before everybody started talking about it?
Right, and I think you can certainly look at the evolution of DevSecOps as security folks, both inside organizations like in the security team and frankly in the vendor community, looking and saying we need to bring what is happening with security closer to the software development, because it just doesn't work otherwise, right? We're not shipping software 4 times a year anymore. We're shipping it tens of times a day, and the processes that people have done historically don't scale to that. The challenge, I think, that came with that was, there were changes that were welcome, that improved the tooling. So instead of coming at the development team with a 25-page PDF report, maybe if you're lucky, it's probably more like 250. But maybe they're coming at you with Jira tickets, which is better, right? Or, something that comes into the pipeline. But I think that the thing that some folks miss, both in the vendor side and in the practitioners, is the mindset shift, which is, security is not in DevSecOps as a control, right? It's not something that's there to put the brakes on things. It's there, as a more like a safety technology to help you go faster with, safely. It's like the difference between, a governor on somebody's car that keeps you from going over 50 miles an hour versus, seatbelts and airbags, which say, we know that you're going to go, over 50 miles an hour on a state highway, but let's make sure that you can do it as safely as you possibly can. Right.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. But I wonder, when we're talking about that shift in mindset, do you think that it's something that we need to approach perhaps from an educational point of view? And when I say educational, I mean actual education. I mean, do we need to start incorporating this mindset into how computer science is taught in higher education institutes and even in high schools for that matter? Or is it something that is going to kind of continue to be a separate thing between developers and security, and eventually they'll just kind of get the idea and we'll, kind of move forward from there?
Yeah, I think that's the other aspect of it, right? On the one hand, there's the testing, and then on the other hand, there's, how do you slow down the introduction of new issues in the first place? And then how do you empower developers to go and fix them? And that's hard when a developer hasn't had to think like an attacker, and they haven't had to consider all the different ways that somebody could come in and open their code wide up, right? I think that the challenge is that's not a mindset that's taught in university. That's not a mindset that a lot of folks get in on the job training, and so we have to try to rectify that however we can. Right now, Vericode's getting ready to launch a collegiate hacker games competition to get teams from universities competing against each other to write secure code and with a winner take all kind of scoreboard associated with it. So I think there are things that we can do at the very beginning of the talent funnel, but given all the developers that we already have in the world already, I think that we also have to look at how can we help them think how somebody would be breaking their stuff, and also arm them with what they need to know to be able to address those things, to code defensively, and to close the issues once they've been introduced into the code in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will say my son is he's a junior at a college and he's majoring in game design. And they're actually approaching they're not just doing code, but they're actually doing all aspects of game design, and that includes writing the songs and the scripts and things like that. So it's a really, really fascinating program. And I tell you this because I almost feel like this is the way we need to approach development in general now. We can't just look at it from code. We need to look at it from cybersecurity, and then also from how well it runs, and its agility and its stability, and things that everything that can break the code, I think, needs to be addressed and taught early enough so that developers really understand that it's not just about, grabbing code from other places and pulling it all together and making an application. It really does need to be more of a holistic process for organizations, and that includes security.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, because with game design, especially, you don't think about gaming as being a security sensitive, kind of market, but it absolutely has to be, given the damage that, a vulnerability that allows a player to cheat can pose to an in-game economy, or to, the stability of a large multiplayer, kind of game environment. So yeah, if their curriculum isn't already covering application security as part of what they're looking at, they probably should be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it really needs to be, a much broader conversation among, in any area of, if code is being taught in any major or any curriculum, I think that needs to be a very major part of the conversation. But, what about pivoting from higher education into kind of the job market? I mean, should organizations be a lot more upfront, if you will, about what they expect from their developer ranks when they're hiring from a security perspective? I mean, do they expect them to have that maybe base level of cybersecurity understanding with them, or if they don't, should they?
Yeah, I think that my experience in this market, and I've been at Veracode for more than 10 years, is that the thing that moves the needle on kind of the demand, if you will, for secure software is the people who are actually paying money for software or for development skills, demanding a certain level of security, as part of what what is brought to the table. And we've seen that play out in the software market, where starting with supply chains like financial services, and then going out into other industries, the demands of the big purchasers in those industries, for secure software, kind of forced everybody to up their game. I think the same thing can happen in software development. I think that it's unlikely to be that purely demand driven in the talent market, just because there's a lot of developers out there. I think what's more likely to happen is a blend of, at some point we'll evolve our way toward, some level of knowledge, kind of that you can put I don't like to suggest certificates, because, you can definitely, kind of go overboard with trying to certify that somebody is a secure, and secure developer and get yourself into trouble with that. But I can see a model in the future where an employer might look for that sort of proof on somebody's resume. And I can also see a model where motivated software professionals might go out and seek that knowledge on their own and put it on their LinkedIn profile, right? Yeah. As a differentiation. And I think that both are likely to happen. Right now I've got a secure developer certification on my LinkedIn profile, though I haven't written code in a long time.
All right then. Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. I think that it's going to take some time, but I think eventually we will get to kind of almost a hybrid model where your developers are almost as well versed in cybersecurity as cybersecurity professionals are, and then maybe we'll get to a point where the cybersecurity professionals are almost as well versed in developing and coding as the developers are. So I think we're going to see some interesting times ahead when it comes to DevSecOps and application development in general and security thereof. So, but Tim, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Love having the conversation with you, and I'm sure hopefully down the road we'll have another one.
Great.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody, we've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stick around. All right, next up, we have Mitch Ashley's Analyst Corner. Always great insights. Let's give it a listen.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies. This idea of shadow IT, I remember hearing that from some executives that I worked with when I was leading IT, and there is no shadow IT. Even then, which has been a number of years ago, that was sort of we can say that, but there is, and there's going to be. You're not going to stop it. Whether it was as simple as getting Dropbox way back when that was a thing, that was a new thing, or building applications like today with low code, no code, or SaaS apps, whatever it might be. So I think we need to put dirt on the no shadow IT or the shadow IT concept and just move on, because Let's face it, credit card and a desire to do something, you can sign up for everything from Amazon to a pre-built app that is already created, or a technology to create your own application. So let's step back and talk about, well, what is IT's role in this post-no shadow IT world? There's really a couple of things, three things actually, that I think usually the driver for where there's an intersection between an application that's being created elsewhere in the organization, could be in a business unit, product team, back office, operations, whatever it might be. And then when they need to work with IT. And so these are great things for you to think about of these are the kinds of services we need to offer to the organization, obviously in a way that's secure and maintains the integrity of the data and applications and et cetera that we have. So that brings us to the first one. Security is often one of the first drivers to have an application outside of IT come to IT for some kind of security support. Can be usually it's SSO on because people don't want to maintain yet another password, et cetera. It can be even more kind of stepping into it, more identity management of users and access control that go with those kind of permissions. So security is often the first outreach of, hey, I need something. Can you help us out? We need to connect into our directory. We need to connect into our single sign-on, whatever it might be. A second area is data. Applications obviously can create and do create a lot of their own data. They can use external data. They can also have a need to use internal data from internal databases or sources. It can be something that might be warehoused in a data lake. It might be something that's within an application or a database that's serving multiple apps. So applications need data to function as well as often to other apps, which brings me to the third point, and that is interfacing with other applications. So instead of replicating, we already have a system that does inventory, or replicating a system that might do purchase orders. Let's tie into those systems. How can we interface to those? Do we have an API? Is it RESTful? Is it simple? Is it more complex? We have to get a little more involved and figure out how we can provide some technical support if the team outside of IT doesn't have that capability. If they do, great. Here's the SDK to go have at it. So those are three things, and you think about, no longer think about IT as this hard outer shell and soft inside, kind of like we used to talk about things in security, but think about the touch points where there's going to be needs within the organization. I had a really interesting conversation a while back. This was about a year ago, actually, at RSA in 2020, with a security executive from a major foods company. And he was describing some successful projects that his security team, as the CISO, was having of working with outside of IT, internal applications. And he built this whole strategy around identity management. That was the thing that we really need to secure, at least the start of what we need to secure, and that applications would need to come to him for in his organization. And it worked. It was a great strategy. At least the progress and success that they had seemed phenomenal. And I spent a good bit of time kind of quizzing him, asking about how you decided that, what approach did you take? How did you support teams inside and outside IT with this? And it was just very smart. Kind of, how do we do security in the cloud? Let's start there. And of course, once they do something in an environment like Amazon or Azure or Google, okay, that's something that can now be replicated. They don't have to rebuild it every time for every app. They've got a service set up on different platforms that they can use. So smart way to do it. So I hope that prompts some thinking for you about how you might support, and not just support, but enable. We're in a world where people are going to create their own applications, whether it's with or without IT, but they still need the infrastructure, the data and technology and security of much of what IT does, just in a different form and in a way that they can interface and integrate with. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening.
CISO Talk. to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Our final segment today is The View with Vizard. Mike Vizard talks to RAFE CEO Hasib Boudani. They talk about how managing fleets of Kubernetes clusters will get easier. Interesting conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Hasib Boudani, who's the CEO for RAFE. Hasib, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to talk to you again.
So I think the last time we did talk, it was still early days in the land of hybrid clouds, and now it's all Kubernetes all the time. So what is going on in the world of Kubernetes management? It feels maybe like we're moving from the early days where people had onesie, twosies clusters and they're trying to manage fleets. This has been a long time coming from your perspective. Where are we in the adventure?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think at this point, soon you're going to see your toaster at Walmart's going to say with Kubernetes on it. It's everywhere. But I think the fundamental thing here is, from a maturity perspective, we are going from a market that was all about Kubernetes to a market that is about Kubernetes, the distributions, and then Kubernetes, the management layer. And so how do I manage the stuff that I have everywhere? Because it's going from, essentially these kind of, tinkering projects in a large company in a corner, some small team trying it out, to this becoming an enterprise platform, right? All of my future modern applications are now going to run on Kubernetes, be it in Amazon or some cloud or in a data center. But Kubernetes is becoming a key architecture component for large enterprises. So now enterprises are asking questions that perhaps were not asked before, which is, for example, who has access to all these clusters? Where are they running again? And am I getting all the right logs? Do I have the right strategy for upgrading? Are we sure that Twistlock is running on all of them? These are the questions that are coming up now, right? So this requires for companies to think about, well, how do I manage all of this stuff? Be it in Amazon, in the cloud, or be it in a data center. And I think this is what we've been kind of focused on. I mean, you and I have talked about this before where, look, I mean, nobody's got a single cluster. And when you have more than 3 clusters, you have to really think about this as a fleet. A small fleet or a large fleet doesn't matter, but it's a fleet, right? And thinking about these management questions that I highlighted before is where the market is clearly seeing a need, a gap, and RAFE seems to fit that gap really nicely.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past, and a lot of people are talking about, is the notion of managing fleets of Kubernetes clusters all the way out to the edge and in the local data center and up in the cloud. Are we getting close to the point maybe where we're in danger of some Kubernetes sprawl? Is that the next big thing we should be looking out for?
So man, sprawl is happening. Actually, one of the things is I do this every single time. So every time we agree on a deal with a customer, right? They all we talk about how many clusters you're going to have this year, and everybody picks a number, and I'm going to have 10. And I tell everybody this, Mike. I say, I guarantee you're wrong. It's going to be larger. I guarantee it. You're going to be wrong, and they're always wrong. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's because look, it's a powerful tool. As more and more teams come up, there's a need for having more and more clusters. And that exposes a problem, obviously, right? You need a way to manage all of these. But sprawl is happening, but for all the right reasons, right? Because companies are empowering more teams to deploy applications in a bunch of different locations. And it's helping companies move faster. We have this one financial services customer on our platform who they found us in September. And then they found us, they've been working on Kubernetes management for a year. And they had an end of year deadline to go launch something in a public cloud. And the reason why they came to us is because, well, they've been working on something internally for a long time. It wasn't going as fast as they thought it would. They told me in October when we closed the deal, we're going to have 5 clusters. That's it. We don't think there's ever going to be need for more than 5. They're at 17, in my opinion. I think the last count, like maybe a month ago, they're at 17. started with one team. The second team saw the value and they said, we're going to have our own. And the third team saw value, we're going to have our own. And they were in Amazon. They said, well, but this other team is in Azure. Can we go there also? Cluster swap. It's great. It's a magical thing, but it's actually helping them. This company is now running so much faster. They are doing deployments to production like 3 times a week now, when they used to do this every 3 to 4 months. Isn't that awesome? But that's possible because of Kubernetes. And of course, containerized applications.
Do you think also that some of this is politics? People want to have their own clusters, right? I mean, in theory, I could run everything on a very large cluster, but last time I checked, most of the IT guys I know, especially application owners, they were absent that day in kindergarten when we all learned to share, and they all had their own little cluster and their own infrastructure, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. What do you think?
Yeah, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten is a great book for all of us to read. But I think, most people start with that philosophy, which is, I'm going to take a big fat cluster, I'm going to kind of shard it using namespaces or something, and that's how we're going to do business. But it sort of doesn't work out because upgrades, the blast radius for upgrades is pretty significant, right? Not everybody's going to be ready to go to the latest version of Kubernetes, for example, or, hey, on this new cluster, I'm going to upgrade to the latest version of Prometheus. Maybe the previous team is using something older. For all kinds of crazy reasons, I find people start with these big fat clusters, and then they can start sharding them. And then eventually, the model that seems to work, and we kind of recommend this on day one, every dev team, just give them their own cluster. Maybe it's small. Maybe you need a single node or a single master. Don't worry about HA. In fact, in our world, we can also support essentially a hyper-converged cluster. So you don't need to have separate nodes for master if you're doing this on premises. Save some money. But give everybody their own cluster. And then within the team, maybe the developers get their own namespaces. But now dev team 1 has a cluster, dev team 2 has a cluster, and on and on. Production, if you want to share it, it's fine. But that production is under control of like some central authority, right? But the development clusters, let them go crazy. And in any case, one of the key capabilities in the Rapid product is it's built on these zero trust concepts so that the identity of the user determines what cluster they have access to. The same software-defined perimeter concepts that we're familiar with on the enterprise security side, we apply to Kubernetes. So if it's Mike accessing, well, he's part of dev team 1. So, okay, then he only gets to see that cluster or clusters, but then Haseeb is part of the operations organization. He can see everything, and he can connect to everything and can manage everything. So creating these kind of very, very flexible isolation boundaries that are identity-based actually makes it easy. So you want to bring up new clusters? No problem. Just the identity of the user, in any case, is going to determine what they have access to. So that kind of gives you a best of both worlds concept. Start with a big fat cluster and then shard it over time, but you don't need to worry about security or compliance.
There seems like there's a lot more people talking about Kubernetes management platforms these days. Ultimately, what differentiates who in your mind?
So every time we talk, I after the call, I kind of feel like, wow, I said a lot of contrarian things on that call. So here's my opinion. So distributions don't matter. Whether you're using EKS in Amazon or upstream Kubernetes, or Amazon now is EKSD, or I don't know, it doesn't really, it's not important, right? So we need to get past this idea that my distro is better. Who cares? It's all upstream anyway, right? So in our platform, for example, we have an upstream Kubernetes distribution that we offer. We curate it, we like it. If you're in Amazon, I tell my customers, don't use ours, use EKS. In fact, in our product, you can build an EKS cluster, or in Azure, you can build an AKS cluster, and on and on. Doesn't really matter. The pain is not there. The pain is, okay, now that my cluster's up, what happens next? How do you know they look the same? How do you know the right version of the right component is running on all your clusters? How do you know Mike doesn't have access to the wrong clusters? How do you know your pipelines are actually working? Because remember, we build these clusters for a reason, the application, right? So is it easy for developers to actually kind of write code, check it in, and then magically the code shows up on the cluster? We provide built-in GitOps pipelines. Can you take backups of your control planes for all of your clusters across all of your sites? That's a one button in our UI. This is where we need to go as an industry. Fighting about my distribution is better, or it doesn't matter. Pick one. Let's focus on the real problem, the IT issues. And I use the word IT very loosely here, but the IT issues that have to do with managing environments, managing infrastructure, That's where we should be spending time, because this is now an enterprise project, right? Enterprises, they have certain standards. We have to align with those standards around, visibility, auditing, compliance, repeatability, high availability. Let's focus on that. This is where we'll all kind of be more successful.
One of the things we always hear about Kubernetes is, initially at least, it's always led by a DevOps team. People have some programming expertise. There's a army of IT administrators out there. They don't have a lot of coding expertise. I've talked to them in the past. One wise guy said, if I knew how to code, would I be in ops in the first place? So what is going to be the role of administrators going forward in the land of Kubernetes? And is everything going to be so DevOps centric that everybody has to have programming skills, or is there room for the traditional mere mortal IT administrator?
Yeah, man. I became a product manager because I was not a great developer, man. So I feel that pain. I think that every company has one to few experts when it comes to DevOps, right? So they understand what they're doing. They're the ones who are writing the automation layers. And usually what I find is that team or those few developers are the consumers of a technology like Graphic. Just as an example, my first call this morning was with a large company that is actually happens to be Amazon native. And their DevOps team has basically day one started by saying, look, we have Circle CI and we use GitHub Actions, and then everything we do is going to be automated. So we're going to run a pipeline from Circle CI to build a cluster, and then all code will show up on clusters using GitHub Actions. How does that work? No problem. We have recipes for every single one of those answers. We have an answer for everything. So they're going to create the framework that people will use, but then they're going to hand it over to an operations organization. They call it cloud team, but same thing, operations or infrastructure. And that team is going to take care of the day-to-day upkeep. And their customer is the development organization who's going to write code. This structure is what I see everywhere. So there's a DevOps organization that sort of consumes this technology, and they need to kind of plug Rafe or whatever into their automation frameworks. They've already made some decisions in a company. Maybe they're a GitHub shop. Maybe they like Circle CI. Maybe they like Jenkins. Maybe 100% GitOps. It's okay. We work with any model. You decide how you want us to kind of provide you a recipe. We will, no problem. And then they kind of create the framework, and then other people consume that framework. So the people who we talk to on a day-to-day basis, right, once things are in production, it's the operations organization. They're not writing code on a daily basis, but they're watching our UI for metrics. They're the ones who are doing the upgrades. When things break, they're the ones who get the alerts from our platform, for example, and then they call us or Slack us. Nobody calls anymore, man. Everybody wants to talk on Slack, but they'll Slack and say, hey, this cluster in this region or this data center, I'm seeing that it's producing this, crash loopback error. What should I do? And then our team, so we provide a 24/7 support shop. We work with them and we can help them figure out, okay, well, it looks like this specific application is the issue. Let's go track that person down. So look, everybody has a role here. The DevOps team is going to be focused on automation, but that's not it, right? You have to still run the stuff, right? And the traditional operations teams are the ones who are consuming the automation that the DevOps team generates. In fact, in more often than not, the budget for things like this, it may come, CIO level and whatnot, but in terms of, who owns it, if you will, on a daily basis, is the VP of operations or VP of infrastructure. They're the buyers, but the DevOps teams are the ones who do the automation. And then the internal customer is always going to be the development organization. We, as a vendor, we have to understand this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? How these organizations work, right? There are 3 different cohorts, right? Dev, DevOps, and Ops. They all have to have a player. In fact, there's a 4th cohort that also matters, which is security. Is this a secure platform? I'm going to consume this as a SaaS product. Wow. Does it comply? How do you do your own security? Every deal we close, there's a security team that gets involved, and they want to know, how do we run our own SaaS? We run our own SaaS product by the way, our app is also running on Kubernetes. Our whole platform is a Kubernetes native platform. So how do you secure that? How do you make that work? So all 4 of these teams have to be happy with the decision on purchase of a product like Rafe, and they have to be able to consume it on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, these don't work. But in that kind of engagement is how we've learned, what is everybody's role here. So yeah, just because you don't know how to write code it's okay. On a daily basis, nobody's writing code anyway, right? It's about operations, understanding what's happening, alerting, logging. This is where operations will continue to have a role. This is not going to go away anytime soon, in my opinion.
So I think I heard you say that if I get the right automation framework, I can call myself an SRE and give myself a raise at 5 o'clock.
Totally. Hey man, put Kubernetes on your resume and I'm sure somebody's gonna pay more money. But look, the reason why that happens is because not everybody can do this, right? That is fair, right? This is a hard thing to do, but I'm seeing, we've all been in this industry for a while. I've been selling some product on there for many, many years now, right? So guys I used to sell to 15 years ago who have now acquired new skills and now, they're operating, these modern environments. Of course, this is new, right? Amazon was new 12 years ago when we all kind of learned about this new thing called the cloud, but we all learned it and we moved on, right? We now have more skills. So just because not everybody is a coder in Python, I don't know Python. I know Bash. I can write shell scripts, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's not a big deal because there's so much to do here. This new modern infrastructure this new kind of trend, it's creating value, but with all new things comes new pain, right? So yeah, all of us are going to be busy for a long time. I'll be busy building products, and Mike will be busy writing about all the complexities of these products.
Oh, cool. Do you think that people are still intimidated by Kubernetes in their minds? Is that holding some folks back, or are we past that point?
I don't think we are, unfortunately. I think the reality is, look, most companies are early in this market, right? And the day zero experience for most people is they bring up like kind of micro KRS or something on the laptop. It's pretty easy. And they go, okay, this is easy. I got it. And, they try and bring it up, with like actual kind of automation in a data center or in a cloud. And it's actually not that easy, right? There's, 15, 20 things that need to be thought about. Usually, managers put like one guy or gal on it, and it's not easy. So there's a lot of innovation. I've talked to enough companies who say to me, look, we looked at this like a year ago or whatever, and then we kind of said, this is not for us. And every single time, the challenge was that they didn't know what they didn't know, right? They didn't realize the things that needed to be solved for. You know what I mean? So they didn't understand the gamut of the 15, 20 things that you got to think about to make an environment work cohesively, well. How will they know? There's no manual for this, right? We're all learning by kind of touch and feel, right? We kind of jump into this and we learn. And unfortunately, that's never a good thing, right? Because nobody has time to read, and be participate in the CNCF on a daily basis, right? We all have day jobs, right? Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has that luxury. Some people are paid to do that, of course. So I think more and more frameworks are needed for companies like that. So they don't have to go learn. They should be able to consume. Right. To me, that is not to kind of, start selling on Rafe, but that is to me the reason why Rafe exists. Because most companies, their teams are too busy, fighting fires to go spend the next 6 months learning about not just Kubernetes, but about the ecosystem around Kubernetes. We sell them that as one management layer, essentially, right? You just buy it as a service, right? You don't have to think about it. Are you worried about your secrets management? Don't worry about it. It's a button on UI. You worried about pipelines? No, it's in the UI. You want to worry about backup and restore because somebody in security said you must take a backup of your control plane for Kubernetes. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's in the UI or whatever in the CLI or in the API. Right? That's where clearly the market needs to go if we want the market to be larger. If we keep it where it is now, which is a lot of different tools that we have to kind of cobble together, and you have to have a certain level of expertise. Yeah, not everybody's going to come play here. If you want the TAM to be bigger of this market, you got to make the tools easy. You got to make them easy to consume, and they all need to work together, right? And to me, that is the distinction between Kubernetes and Kubernetes management, right? Which is why I keep saying, look, the fact that you have some Kubernetes, who cares? Yeah, distribution, I don't care. Whatever, buy somebody's, I don't care. Focus on the management layer because that's where the pain is on an ongoing basis.
All right. So the more high priests that are required to run something, the smaller the number of platforms that are going to be out there because there's just not enough high priests to go around.
Yep. Do you remember InfiniBand?
Mm-hmm.
No shit. It's the same problem. It's awesome, but my God, it's so complicated. We need to make things easier.
All right. Hey, Haseeb, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, really appreciate your time, Mike. Enjoyed it always.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another episode of TechStrong TV. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just a quick reminder, last week we hosted the Cybersecurity 2021 Virtual Summit. It's now on demand for your viewing pleasure. If you're interested in checking it out, or if you had registered and was not able to attend the event, you can absolutely access it on demand. You can just go to MediaOpsEvents.com and take a look at the page, and that'll get you everything you need to know to either register and view the event on demand or get to the event on demand. So please, like I said before, it's available for you if you want to check it out. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of TechStrong TV. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. I hope my sister has a happy birthday, and whatever you do, please stay safe.